Follow me with your shape-shifting smiles, and I see you. Maybe they'll believe you. Illuminati, occult dawn trial, silver discs and hidden files, and we see you. We've got to believe you. Blast off. Blast off. Blast off. Blast off.
Guys, you are in for a treat today. It's a long one with over 3 hours. We have Joe with us sharing all sorts of information, as well as Eric, a mutual friend of ours. Before we get into all that, let me just say we had our technical difficulties. Hard to manage. I had to go in there. There was all kinds of audio issues, so it's not going to be perfect on audio. There's going to be weird echoes. We lost part of the stream for a minute. I had to get it back. You name it. If it could go wrong, it did go wrong. So right out of the gate, I'm going to say definitely pick up Joe's book. I Was a Military Lab Rat. We're going to get to how you can pick that up later in the podcast. And also definitely, if you haven't been over to heroparanormal.com, slide on over there, smash that green subscribe button. We have tons of content over there. If you aren't subscribed, you're missing out. Also, we have a little eBay shop. If you go to the store there, we have things like t-shirts, hats, books, and even health supplies like Spice Natural Bronze, 100% organic, and Bulletproof Wolves soap, a number of other items, just knickknacks. Any of the merch you buy over there is going to help support the heroparanormal.com podcast. And if you're listening to this via YouTube, Spotify, Rumble, whatever the case might be, please, please, please do me a solid to subscribe, like, and share, because the shadow ban is real. I have a hard time believing some of these things, but with this episode, man, was I ever convinced that everything that can go wrong in specific situations like this one, when somebody's telling you that they were a military lab rat, that they had all kinds of ties and connections with aliens, space, the Montauk Project, remote viewing. It gets weird. They had clones. Anyway, I don't want to let all of the secrets out of the bag up front, but what I can tell you is, please, 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 definitely try to get this book, and definitely subscribe to heroparanormal.com. Without further ado, let's get our guest on the line here. Joe Swenson, welcome to the Hero Paranormal Podcast.
Thank you.
And we should also have Eric here on the line.
Yes, we do.
How you guys doing this morning?
It's the morning, right?
It's right. I'll take it. Any day above ground is good. And
exactly.
So yeah, there's so much to discuss here. We have Eric on because he's a mutual friend of ours and he knows us both pretty well. And a lot of times with these topics, it's nice to sort of have somebody that can vouch for you, because these as you guys know, these are very, very mysterious and interesting topics. And Joe, where did we want to kick off? Did you want to tell people a little bit about yourself, or should we just go right into your childhood, or what got you down this path, you think?
Well, I was born to a mother who was supposedly sterile. And in kindergarten, they gave me an IQ rating of 198. So that may have put me on a watch list, shall we say. My dad was in the 101st Airborne. during World War II. And let's see.
Were you, Joe, do you want to mention your parents being involved in the masonry?
Yeah, Mom and Dad were. Dad was a mason and a Shriner, and Mom was an Eastern Star. So I grew up as a Lutheran, or I should say a Masonic Lutheran. And so that was a little bit different, but other than that, it was pretty much normal. And in '72, I got my draft number. I had graduated from high school a year before, and I'm 71, and I got my draft number in '72 as being 29, and Vietnam War was going on, so I could either wait to be drafted by the Army.
Hey, Joe, before you go into that, I was thinking we could do this kind of more of a chronological order. Let's maybe start your first childhood experience, and then we can get into that, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, that's fine. That's perfect.
Okay.
Fine.
Yeah.
When in '63, I was 9, soon to be 10, and we went out to visit my cousins on my aunt's family farm, which had no electricity and no gas. It was when she grew up there, everything was horse-drawn, and you know, there was an outhouse. There was no running water. You had to go out to the pump that was, you know, about 50 yards from the house to pump water. You know, all kinds of weather. There was no surrounding it to give you any shelter on it. And it had a old wood cook stove in it. And anyway, it was a Friday night we'd gone out there, and it was August because the oats were ready to be harvested. And Jim, Jay, and Jed were my cousins, and the four of us had slept in the porch overnight from Friday night to Saturday morning. And I like to get up with the before the sunrise and hear the morning chorus. You know, that's the bird singing and that type of stuff, and then watch the sunrise. And as I got up there and the sun was just peeking over the lake and the trees, this was Big Detroit Lake, I heard someone say, "We're coming to visit you today." And I went, "Who?" Hey, Joe, what's going on? Who's this coming to visit? I have no idea what's going on here. You know, I'm just 9 years old. Jim had turned 11, and Jay had turned 9, and I don't remember what Jed's age was at that time. But the day before, we had all been given some little die-cast Model Ts and Model A's vehicles to play with in the sand when our moms went in to pick up groceries. So we did our morning chores and had breakfast, and then it was about 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning, and they had gone to the store in Detroit Lakes, Minnesota, and we were playing in the stand of the road, and there were two little grays asking us if we wanted to see a real Model T of a Volt. And they're over by the equipment shed, which was probably about 20 yards away. And we were by the tool shed and the water pump is where we were playing. And so went over to see them, you know, and one of the guys was on the roof of the equipment shed, which was just an open front shed so that they could park the equipment underneath of it, if you will, to keep some of the rain off of it. So we followed them back on the road behind the shed, we had to climb up over a tree and walk around the swamp, and then we were inside their vehicle, and we were up in the air. They showed a couple pictures to Jim, one of a lush green planet and one of a burnt dry planet, and they asked Jim which one he preferred, and since I was next in age, I figured I'd be going next, and they asked Jay, and I said, "Hey, wait a minute, what about me?" And they said, "Well, you don't count." So I was kind of upset about that, and I said, "I'll show you. I'll just go up and build one of my own, build a vehicle of my own." And
Joe, the vehicle you're referring to is a UFO, correct?
yeah, it's a UFO. This UFO was a typical UFO saucer type thing that had 3 pods on the bottom. When they took off after they brought us back, I'll get to that in a minute. Anyway, so they thought it was just hilarious that I would say something like that to them, and I thought they were laughing at me. Like I said something really stupid, so I was upset about that. And that started me on a path to learning electronics and computers and stuff, so I could actually, and trades, so I could actually build one when I got older. And as they were laughing and stuff, Jed said, "Hey, I can see our mom's car down there. She had a white interior, red exterior convertible, Chevy." And so they brought us back, and we came running. We walked around the swamp and jumped off the tree and ran back down the road. We're all excited. Our moms were unloading the groceries and stuff and getting ready to take it into the house, and we came out. And Aunt Lois got really upset because we were talking about aliens and being abducted and stuff on the farm, which I didn't really understand at the time. And she said, "There's no road back there. There's never been a road back there."
Whoa, no road there.
And so we said, "Sure there is." Well, we get back there, the grass is chest high. There's no road there. It doesn't look like there's ever been a road there. And she told us not to ever talk about it again. And as I grew up older, well, when they dropped us off and their vehicle was lifting off, we could see the typical saucer shape with 3 little bulbous things underneath for control surfaces.
And was this daytime or nighttime, Joe?
Yeah. This was about 11 o'clock in the morning
Okay.
on a clear day. Light clouds in the sky, no threat of rain or anything like that. Nice August summer day.
Was this near the Great Lakes of Michigan, or am I?
No, this is in Detroit Lakes, Minnesota. If you go to Minnesota, has a small town called Detroit Lakes, and it's about 40 miles east of the border of Fargo, it is on Highway 10. And there's 2 lakes there. There's one called Little Detroit and one called Big Detroit. And the farm had land that bordered on Big Detroit. And most of the farm land that they had there was woods at the time. And so whenever we went out there, we'd go out and pretend to hunt, and we got a lot of training out there on shooting guns at targets and being able to hit targets that were moving. They had a chair swing that was an old tire, type swing. And they'd mount a target in it, and they'd set the target moving and then come back, and then we'd have to hit the target type deal. So we got to learn how to lead targets and all that kind of stuff for shooting. I'm sure most kids went through that at that age, you know. BB guns and 22s are what we had to work with. So
before you continue, do you have any questions, Ryan, at this point?
Yeah, is this close to that Detroit Lakes armory? I think there's an armory up there, isn't there?
Detroit Lakes has an armory, yeah. Most little cities have their own little armories and stuff like that for their own stuff. The armory was on a little Detroit Lake on the other side of the lake. So that would have been about 10, 15 miles away.
Okay. And this sort of like this event kind of got you down this path of electrical engineering.
Yeah. Well, I started researching electronics because I figured out that they pretty much flew with some form of electrostatic type engineering stuff. And because they glowed orange, you know, when they're in full flight. It was one of the colors that they did, which is a neon color. And I was reading at that time the Young People's Science Encyclopedia. Being severely dyslexic, I had to read each book out loud to my mother every night before bed and go through all 20 volumes of it. So I do have a science background too, to speak of. And I did a lot of experiments and stuff. In school, I was into all the sciences and math and that type of stuff.
So let me ask you a question before we go forward into the time when you enlisted.
Yeah.
Do you recall any other experiences that you might have had with the non-human entities after that first experience with your cousins?
No, I don't. But my aunt was very, very upset that we had seen aliens. So my guess is it was a generational thing for her. And they had been checking on our family. And these, like I said, these were two little grays. The closest thing I could see is they had pictures of Earthens, and they looked like the Earthens. They had these kind of sparkly gray suits on. And the one that we interfaced with more than the other one, the one that was on the ground, kind of had a red sparkly sash type of thing sewn into the suit from his right shoulder down to his left hip. Now that was probably the image they were projecting, because they were projecting the image of the road and all that stuff to us too, if you know what I mean.
Sure. This sounds a lot like the aerial school descriptions as well.
Yeah. And so, you know, if you've got more questions, you know, just ask me. Anyway, so that was it. The next week when we came back, those were harvested. And and that next week, then they came out to our lake, because the lake place that we had, even though it doesn't have a house or anything on it at that time, we just had a little camper trailer and an outhouse. And but the lake that we were on had a sugar sand beach. We had 170 foot of sugar sand beach on Lake 7, Minnesota, which is between Frazee and Burgess. And it's crystal clear, and it had Sunken Island on it, the Village Spring Fed. And I used to do a lot of scuba diving out there.
Was there anything that you think would be significant to point out about your childhood from 9 to like about 17, just before you enlisted in the Air Force?
Well, 9 to 17. really not a whole lot. I mean, I'm severely dyslexic, so while I was in the advanced courses in math and science and engineering and that type of stuff, I was in the remedial reading classes for English all the time. And so I had kind of a dichotomy. The first grade school I was in was Woodrow Wilson in Fargo. And at that time, it's on University, which was a one-way street that was heavily trafficked. And we had a tough playground. They had asphalted the playground, and so the monkey bars and the swing and the merry-go-round and the slide all dumped onto asphalt. So if you fell, you cut yourself up with the asphalt. But the school was also where they housed all the kids who were retarded. Went to school there. So we had classes for the retarded kids, and we had classes for the regular kids at school. It was after that, I left that school and I went over to Thomas Edison over in Moorhead when we moved to Moorhead. And we moved from a side-by-side duplex that we owned to a nice 4-bedroom Rambler with a hatch double garage, classic, modern, up-and-coming type of thing.
So you were only child, is that correct, Joe? Because your mom wasn't supposed to be able to have any children, yet you were born somehow.
Yeah, Mom had a severe case of scarlet fever, and she had several doctors examine her to see if she could have children. And she was told time and again no, that there was too much damage there. I mean, they didn't have the diagnostic tools that we have today, as you know. So, I mean, it was just kind of x-rays and that was about it. Radioscopes and what have you. So, they just said, it's not going to happen. And I'm sure since she was a secretary for the Navy during World War II, she had this unique ability of being able to hear and transcribe or type and transcribe and not remember a word of what she typed. So anything she typed would be classified as far as most people would be concerned.
Interesting. Now, it sounds like you had a very high IQ, and there's something called dialectical, like if you were, you also had some dyslexia. Did you notice that you were a lot more creative than the other kids in your classes?
Not creative artistically.
Right. But task appropriate? Yeah.
Yeah. In first grade, I won the science fair because I had built a robot out of an erector set.
Oh, that's cool.
I went through details and explained how, right now I was controlling the thing manually, but how in the future it would be controlled by computers.
And you just kind of knew that. You knew that that's how it would be.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I knew a lot of things I probably shouldn't. Mom said that I was born out in Vallejo, California, and they had entered me in the Ivory Baby Beauty Contest. And then Dad's job with the IRS went from the San Francisco area to Portland, Oregon. And by the time the callback came, it was past the time of the callback, because they had to forward the mail out to Portland, Oregon. And so that didn't happen, and I'm glad that didn't happen. The gal who got it, I guess, had a really hard life the rest of her life as an accident.
Do you remember when you were in school, sorry to interrupt you, do you remember like any, I guess the common term now would be special programs like STEM or STEAM, or were there people that came in and gave you tests and tried,
My first class in the morning was science.
Interesting.
And we had a science room, and that was in first grade. And in the middle of kindergarten to first grade, I jumped to first grade. They put me ahead a year. That's why I graduated, in 71 and got my draft notice in 72. Anyway, so I remember one of my friends, one of my parents' friends gave me a little kit that had a model rocket in it, vinegar and baking soda, and the Woodrow Wilson School was a WPA building, so it had like these really tall ceilings on it, and so I did the normal loads, kind of had a fizzle start. And the science teacher, she said, "Oh, that's really push, pack it down." And so she put in for a much heavier load than what it was supposed to take. And it went up and stuck in the ceiling, and we had to call the janitor in to take it down. But yeah, the school, we had the duck and cover things that we went through drill. I don't know if you've heard of those.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They're worried about nuclear, bombs and that type of stuff. We had when Dad was an alcoholic, and we had to go out and find him one time, and so Mom thought he might be at the Masonic Temple, and asked me to go in there while she waited outside in the car, kind of standing, because there was no parking there. And so I went in, and I looked into the basement, and they had a split entry, and I got to the main floor, and I asked them in the office on that split, and then I went up. And off to the right was the smoking room. And the smoking room was a very large room. At the far end of the smoking room, it had a huge walk-in fireplace and a big window that looked out over the Fargo Forum building, which was a newspaper for North Dakota. And there were two old guys in there, and there were two guys in there, and they were sitting in front of the fireplace and smoking their stogies. And I went in there and I said, I just was silent, and then they realized I was there, and they asked, did I hear anything? And I said, no, I'm looking for my dad. I didn't hear anything. Well, I did hear. What they were talking about is how they're going to try and rig the election with the newspapers and print and stuff for Kennedy at the time. So that was one of the back rooms. They talk about the smoke-filled back rooms. That was one of them.
Yeah. And now you eventually enlisted. Did you feel any pressure from like a recruiter, or was it a family or just a personal choice?
What was that again?
You eventually enlisted with the Air Force, is that correct?
Yeah, I eventually went into the Air Force, yes.
And did you? Was that like your own choice, or was it a family thing, or was there a recruiter involved?
Yes. What it was I wanted to marry the love of my life, and I was at the time I was going to tech school full time. I was taking college courses. I was dating, And I was working about 30 to 36 hours a week repairing audiovisual equipment. Tape recorders, record players, slide projectors, movie projectors, all that kind of stuff. And the place I was working for had a contract with the school, so I was kept constantly busy repairing the equipment that they broke. But anyway, at that point in time, I figured 75 cents an hour was not enough to get married and have a family with. And I was riding, most of the time I was riding my bicycle back and forth between work and school.
Gotcha. Hold, I'm going to stop you there for 1 second. Something strange here happened on my end. Oh, that is weird. I was just getting an echo, but now it's stopped. Okay, it stopped. Sorry about that, Joe.
Yeah, the echo was breaking up when I was trying to hear your question.
For that was very strange.
No, that's not strange for me. That's normal for what I am dealing with, yeah.
Please go on. So
anyway,
yeah, you were going to marry the love of your life.
Yeah, so, I mean, the first time I ran into a trans person was as a little kid. She had been my babysitter, but she wanted to be a boy because she liked to work on cars. And she was waiting by Bruns radiator service as I was coming off the tracks, because I had walked the tracks from the Y back to the house, and it was probably about 7 o'clock at night. And she had asked me to watch the door because she said she had to go to the bathroom really bad. And I couldn't figure out what was taking her so long to pee. And when she came out, she had her hair back in a ducktail, and instead of the pool skirt and the saddle shoes and that type of stuff that she had wore going in, the lace and the ruffles and all that, she was in jeans and a t-shirt, and her hair swept back, and she had a pack of cigarettes in the sleeve of her t-shirt. So that'll tell you the hair. But I was introduced to that at a very early age.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I don't have any problems with that. It was just an interesting side thing, you know. I wasn't allowed to be in Cub Scouts when we were in Fargo, but when we got to Moorhead, I was able to join a Boy Scout troop, and I did spend a lot of time in the Boy Scouts. So, and I was an assistant junior scout master, and I stopped going for merit badges as a Life Scout because they're forcing classes for the people who are wealthy, so that the kids could go through and become Eagle Scouts. And I didn't think that was right, because it was supposed to be independent study as far as I was concerned. So, yeah, I've been in leadership positions like that all the time, and they're usually pushed on me, and I usually don't seek them out. If you understand that?
Yeah, yeah.
And so, getting back to my time going into the Air Force, I married a twin, and her future husband, my wife's future husband, was thinking, well, he's done college, but he wasn't getting anywhere in college. It was just frustrating. He wanted military stuff. I didn't. I wanted avionics because I wanted to work on the electronic stuff. Anyway, so, and we enlisted together under the buddy plan because they had that going on then. And he ended up going to school for dental modeling, so he'd make teeth for people, dentures and that type of stuff. And they ended up taking him about a month before they took me in. And the flight that I was in Lockwood Air Force Base was in brand new barracks. And it was made out of block and brick. And the lower level of barracks was the mess hall. And then they had an upper level, depending on which side you're on, where it opened out to, whether it opened up out to the asphalt pad between it and the what was to be the classified signal area, decryption and stuff, or whether it opened out to the other side. And
real quick, Joe, when you enlisted, what was your initial commitment as far as time? Did they say, okay, you want one year?
I enlisted for 4 years. My AAFES entrance exam was a perfect paper, and they were wondering how I cheated on it. And the Air Force had their own separate exam, and they had 4 different areas that they tested you in. And they said a perfect paper is 95% or better, but they'd only rate it at 95% because no one could do perfect, type of thing. And so I had 3 95s and an 85 on those. 85 was in business, science and engineering, and math were the high ones. My basic training was not your typical basic training, I was all pumped for going out there and, jogging and physical exercise and that type of stuff. Now, mind you, when I went in, they had to decrease my height on my paperwork and increase my weight. So they decreased my height to 6.3 or 6'3", and I was actually 6'3 3/4" at the time. And they showed my weight as 160 pounds, and I was 150 at the time. But that was so it would fit their requirements so they could take me in. And basic training was a lot of marching. Nothing strange about that. And what they do is they take us to a class where we're supposed to learn something about military history or military this or military that. I thought this would be cool. They get us into the class, they take roll call, and then they call me out to go take other tests. So my basic training was basically more testing, test after test after test. We got to the end of basic training, and we were going to go to the shooting range that day, but before we could go to the shooting range, they wanted us to do a pull-up. Now, I've never been able to do a pull-up, but I have been able to do a chin-up. And so I went to do just a chin-up. And they wouldn't let me do that. They had me try to do a pull-up. And they had the other guys, they let them do chin-ups, but they wouldn't let me do it. So I don't know what the deal was with me. It's like they had signaled me out for anything. And basic training was kind of strange. If we ever needed anything, like a new toothbrush or whatever, they'd have someone else go get it for us and give it to us. We were not allowed to see the base at all, speak of, other than the places that we were being marched to, for testing. So anyway, we go down. They have M16, the Magnum Mattel, and of course we've only got 5-round clips because you know how they heat up and they and they have all kinds of problems. So we get 5 rounds of sighted end, and we get 5 rounds of target practice, of target shooting with it, normal shot, single shot. And then we get 5 rounds of semi-automatic and 5 rounds of full automatic. And I had 5 bullseyes on single shot and 5 bullseyes on semi-automatic. And on full automatic, I had a difference of opinion with the range master. He said I got 4 bullseyes, and I said I got 5. And I watched the bullet go through, and he said, no, it had to have gone far. You couldn't have gotten it through like you said it was. It went through where the other one went, type of deal. But anyway, so then we march back, we have supper, and after supper, my DI comes over to me and says, Joe, I got some good news and some bad news for you. And I said, okay. He said, the good news is you qualified as a marksman. All right. That was no surprise to me. And he says, the bad news is I'm going to send you for some additional physical training. Okay.
Interesting.
You'll be gone for 3 days. Okay. If you make it back. What? If I make it back, I'll be gone for 3 days? Okay. Whatever.
And this was around what year, Joe?
This is 72.
Okay.
This is May of 72. And so he says, I say, well, should I take my uniforms with me? And he said, no, you'll be given new uniforms. For 3 days, I've given new uniforms. They're here and they fit me already. What do you mean? Type of deal. If I'm doing physical training, I'm going to get sweaty, right? And I said, well, what about my skivvies? My personal gear, my razor, my toothbrush, and that stuff. He said, you won't need any of that. And I need that stuff in case you don't return to send to your folks.
Oh, wow. So they were serious about you maybe not returning.
Yeah. So I thought, well, that was strange too. And he said, you're going to find a barracks. Here's the instruction. And he had a little Post-it note, yellow Post-it note, with some scribbles on it. And when he handed that Post-it note into my hand, I knew exactly where I had to go. The scribbles were unreadable. And they were...
Now this is out of this world, so
there were a couple arcs and a loop, and
but not writing in any regular sense of the word.
It wasn't writing in any term that you or I would recognize.
Right.
Even some of the foreign languages I've looked at, it wasn't anything like any of that.
Gotcha.
Okay, so I get there, and there's this building. It's about 2 stories tall. Yeah, it's long. And in the center of the building, they have about a 30, 40-foot door that opens up to create an overhang. And then an asphalt pad out front, and there's a big pine tree. And this is about 8, 9 o'clock at night that I'm there. So the sun is sloping in. And to look inside the building, all you can see is where the sun cuts in. There's no reflection off of any surfaces. So you can't see anywhere into the interior other than that pie slice or cake slice that the sun cuts in. There was a big pine tree out front and a table underneath it. And it should have cast a shadow onto the building. But it didn't. It cast a shadow directly down underneath it. You understand the strangeness of this?
Yeah.
I get there, and a disembodied voice in my head says, "Why are you here?" And I said, "To learn to do a pull-up, sir. And come." Okay? So then things are basically blank. I mean, things happen. And there were some memories, but I had to recover the memories, most of them. And 3 days later, I'm standing out looking at the setting sun, and the disembodied voice says, "Why are you here?" I said, "To learn to do a pose, sir, but I can do a chin-up." And I was told, "Return to your barracks." I returned to my barracks. My DI is just thrilled to see me because he doesn't have to send a notice home that I was killed in basic training to my folks, which I thought was kind of neat. And I get back, and the next day, they're like, "We were told that you have a really good understanding of particle physics." And I'm going, well, they shouldn't know any of that, even if they talk with my, I mean, yeah, I had, the physics instructor I had would have known, but he wouldn't have said that much, what I can remember of them, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Joe, let me cut you off real quick. You might have, either you're going to get to it or you might have skipped over the part where, what was your weight when you came back? Did you want to?
Yeah, when I came back from my missing 3 days, I was definitely under 100 pounds. And the whole time I was in the service, I ate like a horse. It wasn't that I lacked eating or that I wasn't eating. I was eating like a horse, and I should have been gaining weight.
And Joe, for some reason, I can barely hear you. Is it low on your end too, Eric?
What was that?
I could, for some reason, I can barely hear you. If you could speak up just a little bit.
Okay, I can speak up more. How's that?
Yeah, much better, much better.
Okay. So, I mean, when I came back, you could see every tendon and every bone in my body through my skin.
Whoa.
Does that give you an idea of how thin I was?
Yeah.
I was told to turn to look at me. So I'm reminded of images of people in concentration camps.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyway, they wanted me to go to Colorado Springs for nuclear physics. And with my dyslexia, there was no way I could do it in a timely fashion. And I knew that. And because, you know, those guys just really down the material fast. And so I said no. I said, how about if I be a pastor? And they said, no, you're too much of a conscientious objector to be a pastor. What? Okay. So then they marched me up to this second floor room where they were showing a 16 millimeter film, color film, of munitions, being dropped or fired, and the damage they did to buildings, vehicles, and personnel in full bloody gut-wrenching color, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
Think of how bad it can be, and that's what they're showing.
Desensitizing you.
Well, they wanted to see if we had any problems with it.
Yep.
You know, and they changed the reel out once while I was there, and I was there for about an hour and a half before they called me back. They called me back just as the reel finished. There was a second lieutenant D. Cameron back there who wanted me to be part of the 20 and back program.
Now this was way before anybody had heard of the 20 and back.
Yeah, this is in '72.
Okay, go on. Yeah.
Okay, so you're with me on that, and the 20 and back program that they wanted me to do because there's a couple of them, and I know that there's a couple of them because I helped build the vehicles when I went into space, and I'll get to that later. Anyway, the one they wanted me to be on was the L5 base. L5 is a range point 5 in space, and it's been moved since, so I can talk about it. It was moved when China started going into space a few years back. We had a slow-moving asteroid that was going between the Earth and the Moon during the day, and you could look at it, and you could watch it, and it looked like someone had a magnifying glass over the surface of the Moon that tinted it.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the slow-moving asteroid, quote-unquote, that was being moved.
Whoa.
And that's when they moved the base. And the base was 2,500 foot long. It was made out of debris from the rings of Saturn. And it had a nuclear reactor inside. The Navy actually did the outfitting of the interior of it. And the interior, when they're done, looked like a 1950s battleship or a submarine type thing. So that gives you some idea of what things look like and whatever. The group that I had been with in space had given the U.S. government an 80-foot diameter, 80 to 90-foot diameter curling stone shaped vehicle that glowed orange in flight, and it was out of it would fly up from the central desert of Australia. People stationed on the base would spend 2 months up and 2 weeks down for R&R to recover their physical stuff. And R&R was limited to Australia, New Zealand, and Japan. And when you got into this program, you were either listed as missing in action or killed in action. And your name was changed, and you were not allowed to contact any family or friends ever again.
Ever again. Wow.
Ever again. Yeah. And like I said, your name was changed.
That's huge. Okay.
They told me I was going to be translating Chinese, and when a blip appeared on the screen, I was to tune onto the blip and translate whatever they said. The school for learning Chinese was Monterey, California, and they weren't going to let me get home and get married, obviously, because we had planned a July 1st wedding.
Mm-hmm.
Joe,
Yeah.
are you going to mention some of the things that happened on the base, or do we?
Yeah. Well, when I get to that.
No problem. Go ahead.
Okay. So anyway, I'm kind of down and depressed about the whole thing.
Sure.
And I've got to work KP duty in the officers' barracks. And my KP duty amounted to sitting down and visiting with the master sergeant who was in charge of the storeroom, and then going out and dry mopping the floor for the kitchen. So really hard duty, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And I had lunch, and then he said, "Now you better go out and mop the floor one more time." I said, "Okay." So as I went out and mopped the floor, I'm mopping the floor, and they have red tiles with black grout on the floor. And the floor rose up kind of in a wave, fold, and then dispersed. 3 days later, I woke up, and I was making a bomb. I was putting together a fuse mechanism for a bomb. That's a delayed timer type of thing. Now, mind you, we didn't have access to anything. We never went to the DX, you know. We never went anywhere on base. We weren't allowed free time to go anywhere. We had to stay in our barracks the whole time, which is different than most people go through, from what I understand.
Totally.
So anyway, I'm wondering what happened. I'm putting this together, and why would I be putting together a timer mechanism for a bomb, an explosive timer, you know? And I take it to my DI, and I said, "Here, I don't know what the fuck happened for the last 3 days with me." And so he calls base security, and then marches me down to base security, and they say, they tell me, "Well, you were given a dose of LSD and peyote."
That's LSD and peyote?
Yeah, and peyote. Both
Whoa.
of them together. And I'm kind of like, okay. Well, that's kind of strange. Oh, we have all kinds of drugs on the base, you know. Someone probably just looked at you. Well, how would they know exactly what it was I was given? Someone probably slipped it to me. Anyway, they say, "You can spend the next 6 months here and continue your training to your job in space, or you can go home and be treated as an outpatient at the VA." I said, "I'll take option 2. Because of the late enlistment that I was on, I qualified for all the government programs because I was there long enough. And so anyway, I get home. Well, excuse me, before I get home, they send me to a barracks, and they want me to gain weight. They want me to try and be up to 150 pounds before I go home. And I go to this whole barracks, and they assign a person to be my best buddy. And they give me all this bull crap about this being a barracks for sexual perverts.
Interesting. Okay.
And so I've got this guy who's my best buddy, and I've gained 5 pounds from the night before, you know, to that morning. And I say, "I'd like to go see the BX, Base Exchange." My cousin Rand had been in Vietnam, and he was talking about the great deal he got on some audio equipment at BX. And so I thought, well, that would be a great deal. I went to the BX, they had none of that there. They did have a whole bunch of books, sunset books on crafts and how to build homes, you know, and grow gardens and all that stuff. So I picked those up. And I went to pay for them, and then I went back to my barracks. I remember half the trip back to the barracks, but not all of it. And about 45 minutes to an hour later, the guy comes back and charges to someone, talks to the person on the desk. I don't know what happened. He just fucking vanished in front of me. The guy says, he's been here for over half an hour. What do you mean he just vanished? Yeah. And so the next morning, I've got, that guy is no longer around, and I've got 2 more best buddies. I've gained another 5 pounds. And my future wife and I just like to bowl. And I heard that they had at the rec center there for the enlisted men, they had a 96-lane bowling alley. And I'm thinking, that's got to be cool, right? You guys have probably seen bigger alleys where you are, but to me that was a big deal because most of our alleys were 24 lanes, you know, or 8 lanes. And so I get there, and of course it's summer resurfacing time, you know, back when they had wooden lanes, and they're reconditioning lanes so we could bowl. And there was a hustler shooting a game of pool, and I said, well, I'll shoot 1 game of pool, just to say I've done it, right? I go over and I shoot 1 game of 8 ball, and I'm sure you let me win by a long shot. I was making some ridiculous shots. And he wanted to try and talk me into playing 1 for money, you know, all your money. Let's bet on this ball. No, I don't want to bet. And I thought, okay, I'll go back to my barracks. I don't remember any of the trip home to the barracks. And the guys came in about an hour and a half later, and they said, he just fucking vanished in front of us. In front of our eyes, he disappeared.
Gone.
Gone. Yep, just vanished. And they're like, okay. Of course, they don't talk to me about the whole thing, you know. So the next day, they got 4 guys there to be my new best buddies, and they're discussing how they're going to do things. And I'm weighing in. I gained another 5 pounds, and I figure in a couple more days I'll have enough weight so I can get back. You know, I'm at 120 pounds. A couple more days I'll be, you know, a week or so, I'll be weighing enough so I can go back home. And I should say thank you to my DI. So I knock on his door. Just think about him, knock on his door. And he says, come. He looks up at me, goes kind of ashen white, and he says, stay right there. Don't move a muscle. I think he said fucking muscle. But anyway, he calls base security and says, I found him, and I'll be marching him back. Okay?
Whoa.
And he says, how do you buy the guards at the gate? Guards? Gate? I don't know, I walked. And as we're walking out, I see that there's 2 layers of fencing around the barracks and the secure area. And there's guards at the gate, and there's razor wire on top of the fences. And as we're going out, he tells the guards, I'm going to talk to both of you intently when I get back, so don't leave. And I get back to the old barracks, you know, everything's fine. The next morning, there's 4 MPs there. I'm weighing 125 pounds. And the MPs say, there's 2 of them, 1 on each side, holds a hand on me at all times. One goes back to pack my gear. Tell him I want my blue because we were going to do dress blues for the wedding. He said, no, you get khakis that you got on. You pack the rest of my gear, you know. And,
Oh, man.
The other one's holding paperwork and asking me to sign it immediately, and I'm reading through the paperwork, and it says, I enlisted for six years. I didn't enlist for 6 years. I enlisted for 4. Well, that's not the paperwork I originally signed. Sign it. And I read down, and it says, entered at E1, left at E7. I'm only in basic training. How did I get to E7? And it says that I have a 50-year NDA. I can't talk about anything for 50 years.
50 years.
Yeah. That's a standard NDA for the U.S. And so I'm going like, okay, this is weird. What don't they want me to talk about? What's the problem with these guys being so fucking handsy on me? And I signed the paperwork, you know, and they marched me down to a waiting car. The guy who gave me the paperwork took the paperwork and went down to the car and started up.
And for really quickly, for those that aren't familiar with E7, that's Sergeant First Class, correct?
That's a technical master sergeant.
Yeah, for basic training, that's not what you're going to be. Anyway, go on. Yes.
You know, a technical master sergeant will often tell generals to fuck off. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Does that give you any idea?
Yes.
And I'm going, how the hell did I get to that? I kept having in the back of my mind that I was going to be making $50,000 a year. I don't know what that had to do with anything. Anyway, so they walk me down to the car. They're still holding on to me. One of them starts sliding into the car with one hand on me. Then I'm down and sliding into the car. And the other guy has his hand on me the whole time, too. So this is the whole time they're holding on. Okay? And I'm still thinking this is really strange. And we get to the airport. We come out of the car, and they're still holding on to me this whole time. So they're like I say, they're really handsy. You're not going to make a move without us touching you, type of thing. And the one guy who packed my duffel took my duffel in and got a ticket for me on the flight back home. And the other two guys marched me down to the gate. Guy with the ticket comes in and gives a ticket. I'm seated in first class. There is no one else in first class on this flight. The rest of the flight loads. They're still standing at the door watching me the whole time after they'd set me down in first class. And the stewardess thinks I'm some sort of VIP and comes up to me and, what would you like to drink, sir? And I'm going like, I'm just a kid. I'm not old enough to drink yet. You know, I'll take a soda. And when the pilots announced that they're ready to leave the gate, the two men, the MPs that were watching me, stepped out and the door closed and we started taxiing. And I got home.
Hey, Joe, before you continue, I just want to also say, as far as I recall, you've never been a drinker, and you've never been you've never been an illicit drug user. I mean, you're about as clean as they get.
Yeah. I'm taking CBD now for pain, and I don't take marijuana because it's not legal here. I mean, it's legal, but it's not legal here yet.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So just a little recap. So you were in the service for only 3 months.
Right.
And all that happened during that time. And more, yeah, I know.
So much more. It's ridiculous.
But but before you go on, so you're during this 3-month time, and you came back. You were 150 or whatever. Now you're 100. Now you're gaining weight. In your mind, at that time, looking back, what thoughts are going through it? Are you thinking, how did I lose 50 pounds? What's going on here? And what, are you asking questions?
That was when I first got back. That was, how did I lose it, and how do I get it back again? Now, the thing is, when I was in that wooden barracks, I don't remember eating anything. And I was gaining 5 pounds a day.
When you sign the 50-year NDA, in some instances, now I'm not suggesting it should, whatever, but there's like a debriefing process. Was there any kind of debriefing, or did you know what you were agreeing not to talk about at that time?
No, there was none of that.
So you had no memory. I mean, in other words, during that 3 months, at that time, you're 17, 18 years old.
I had flashes and I had night terrors. The first night back from that, I was sleeping with one eye open. Then I'd roll over and open the other eye.
Yeah.
Close the one. So I did that. I did that for 5, maybe 10 years.
Can you tell us a little bit about those night terrors? What type of, what would those dreams be like? Can you recall?
One of the night terrors, okay. I basically talk about the less terror, night terrors. I mean, I'm using lucid dreaming and everything I can to try and get rid of these things, okay? One, I was on Mars, and I had to change out a plasma fusion battery. It was about the size of a 2-ring binder. A 3-ring binder that's 2 inches thick, I mean. And basically, there are 2 thumb screws, and you loosen the thumb screws, you pull one out, you pop the other one in, put the thumb screws in. And this unit puts out about 100 megawatts of power. And in the brief time on that base on Mars that I was there, that I pulled it out and put it back in again, a T-Rex came in through the gateway. And took out 4 men total.
Now you said a T-Rex.
Yeah, 7 foot tall.
Yeah.
Blue-black iridescent feathers.
Mm-hmm.
Your standard T-Rex. Or maybe you're not used to seeing them that way.
Yeah, gotcha.
You're used to seeing them how the archaeologists represent them.
Right.
Probably. How else could a T-Rex turn into a chicken if it didn't have feathers? Anyway, the guys that were taken out had 5-round. They had 5-round clips, which are again plasma fusion batteries, but they're smaller versions, and they're using smaller weapons like sonic and laser. And he was actually taken down with a railgun, which was kind of like a bazooka.
Wow.
And that had a couple of 5-round clips to power it.
Now this sounds very Montauk-like, and we're going to get to that. But was that the first? Was that the first time that you saw something like that, like a T-Rex? Yeah.
The other thing, the other night terror that I had was I was walking guard duty. The whole time I was with the aliens, I was in a silver spacesuit that took care of everything. Okay. And one of the other night terrors was I was walking guard duty, and about a 5.5 foot tall bat swooped down and took me out.
Wow. So do you think?
Yeah, jump in real quick here. So Joe, what year was it that we met at that conference in Vegas? I'm trying to recall what year that was. Do you remember? Was it 18, 19?
It was after 19 because I
20?
already had COVID. So
Okay.
Probably 20 something, yeah.
Yeah, it was during COVID because you had the mask on when we met. Okay. So I just want a little footnote for the listeners. So I was at a UFO, I forget the name of the conference. It was a super soldier type conference, if I recall.
Something to the stars or something like that.
Yeah. And so how I met Joe was at a lot of these conferences in the morning time, they have an experiencers group meeting where people who have had experiences with whatever the phenomenon is that they had their experience with, they'll come in a room and people will talk. And Joe was in the back of the back row, and I was in the row right in front of him to his left. And it hadn't started yet. The group meeting hadn't started yet, and Joe was kind of chatting with some people, and I'm overhearing him talk about this.
This had to be after 2020.
Yeah, I'm thinking 2021 maybe.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Anyway, so and he mentions some of the things, just very quickly, briefly touched on some things that he's been talking to myself from this morning, and I was obviously intrigued. And I thought, well, Joe, at that time, it was his NDA had not expired yet. It was still, I think, if I recall, there was still about 8 more months or a year approximately.
Yeah, something like that.
So what I did is I approached Joe and I said, I'd like to interview you. Can we, we could do it in my room, and you agreed, and we went up there and we did a video interview that was several hours. And talked about all these things, and I held on to that information. I didn't know if I was supposed to release it right away or not, but I figured, well, let's wait till the NDA expires, and then I held on to it for quite a while because at that time, as you recall, Ryan, there was a lot of controversy about people like Corey Good and others talking about the 20 and Back program. And I thought, well, I wasn't really sure, just meeting Joe, I wasn't really sure what to believe now because I'd already kind of convinced myself that Corey Good was, basically a fraud. And now here I'm hearing this story from Joe that it wasn't like Corey's story, but it had similarities. And now I'm like, I was kind of freaked out a little bit. I never told you that. I was not quite sure what to think. But that's how we met, and we've stayed in touch for about 4 years since then, 5 years, whatever it's been. And we've had many, many conversations. And I've gotten to know Joe pretty well. And we don't have to go into it, but Joe did join MUFON at one point, and he introduced me to on the internet to a couple of his friends. So it's my opinion that Joe's character. I don't see him as a person that makes up stories. That he's not, to me, he's not looking for attention. I think he did write a book, but it's not really published on a bookstore where you can go out and buy it. I think certain people could get a copy of it if they asked him. But I followed you, Joe, and I thought, well, let's see what happens with Joe. Is he trying to gain fame and wealth and whatnot? And none of that happened. I mean, you didn't really try to impose your story on anybody. So to me,
people want a copy of the book.
Yeah, go ahead.
I want them to donate $20 to Minnesota MUFON.
Cool.
That tell you how much I care about it?
Yeah.
And if they can actually do it in person, I can give them a thumb drive. And the thumb drive has a whole lot more information on it. I think at last count it was 26.5 gigabytes of data.
Wow. Okay.
Okay. Well, anyway, I got back and got married, and my mom showed me a letter that she got from the military saying I was MIA in Vietnam. So we had a good laugh over that. The MIA in Vietnam was a cover story for the 20th Act. So I'm wondering how many of those guys who were MIA or KIA in Vietnam were actually part of one of these programs.
Sure.
Anyway, I went to the VA. She got a letter to go to the VA. Mom came as my advocate. And they wanted to give me Thorazine therapy. And Mom was a chemical dependency counselor. And that was the first time I ever heard her swear. And she said, "No way are you giving my son any of that fucking shit. Let's find another way." The other way they found was progressive relaxation. You know, Mom and I both knew about progressive relaxation. It's not a big deal. The progressive relaxation, though, was the Monroe tapes from Monroe Institute.
Yep.
And so I underwent in 72 to 82 training to be a remote viewer under the Gateway experience. Hello?
Yeah. Very, very, now it's a very well-known declassified program, but at the time it was highly classified.
Mm-hmm. They wanted me to do transcendental meditation, and they wanted me to pay for it myself, and I was going like, I don't know. I went to the introduction of transcendental meditation, and they're telling me all these things that I already knew. And they said, if you're really good after you go through all the classes and spend $20,000 with us, you'll be able to go out and form clouds. At the time, I was riding a motorcycle, and there was another fellow there riding a motorcycle. I guess he was there to monitor me. And he went up and said, "Look at the cloud. Can you form clouds?" And I said, "Sure. What do you want? Let's try it." "How about a sailboat?" Okay, so there was a single mast schooner, you know. And it was kind of like, okay, that's kind of cool. "How about Mickey Mouse?" There was a Mickey Mouse head. And I think we did a couple other, and I said, you know, I don't really need to spend $20,000 on this shit that I already know. I did go back and read the book on transcendental meditation, and I did read the book on civil mind control, and I did read the book on hypnocybernetics. Those were all within my peruse.
Was anything to do with Stanford research or the Gateway process or the Monroe process? Did any of that fit into what you're talking about?
The SRI stuff was a different method, and that was a method that Russell Targ promoted. Hal Puthoff was looking for a way. The problem with remote viewing is your emotions and your desires and your wants can influence whatever you're doing. And they were looking for a way that they could do this without it doing that. And so that's where they came up with the Gateway experience.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the actual Montauk experience, I can get to that if you want me to get to that.
That would be great,
Al
yeah.
Balick is the guy who interviewed me for that. I don't know if you've heard of Al Balick.
Absolutely.
And anyway, Hal Puthoff is the guy who had the overall arc of all these projects. He was into everything. He has all the secrets. Anyway,
Okay, Joe, before you get into this part of the story, so it's in case it's not obvious to the listener, you were definitely being monitored after you left. And
Yeah.
at what point did you realize that you had actual handlers or handler?
Well, I didn't have actual handlers until after Montauk, but before Montauk, military intelligence was monitoring all my phone calls and sending people out to monitor who I talked to and where I went. And on the phone, so 72 to 82, I would just screw with them. And I'd be talking to someone, and I'd say, oh, yeah, I guess they're really interested in this conversation. They just picked up the phone. They're listening. They turned on the tape recorder. I must have said something like, they hung up the phone, but the tape recorder's still on.
Yeah. And it's like earlier when I was hearing that echo, I was sure that I was hearing somebody else on there that wasn't you or I. But let's get back to it. I don't mean to derail us.
That's why I say it's not unusual for me to hear things like that. And so anyway, I had done this, and so in 1982, a double-blind meeting was set up between someone who was supposedly ex-military intelligence going through a 12-step program at Grafton to stop drinking, because he had pulled out a gun and shot someone on base up in the Grand Forks, I think. And is what the cover story was that he gave me. But anyway, he arranged this double-blind meeting, and because they were still monitoring me as far as he was concerned. And he wanted to know whether I was psychic or not. And I told him, well, I was hearing the echo in the phone lines. And he was saying, okay, yeah, but they're not supposed to echo. There's still some regions that will echo no matter how accurate you get it. And so I thought I had him convinced, and then I was called in by the VA to talk to Al Balick down in Minneapolis, Minnesota. They had at that time they had a WPA building that was three stories tall, and it was between Highway 55 and the Mississippi River. And it was by Old Fort Snelling. And it was a direct line of sight to the Minneapolis International Airport radar station. And so he interviewed me up on the third floor of this building that was virtually empty except for the three guys that were down on the lower level and Al Balick up on the upper level. And so he said, yeah, I think we'll take me on and into the program, because this was supposed to be another relaxation therapy session to deal with the PTSD from my time in the military. And of course it was more Monroe tapes, among other things. And so the next, I was told that, yeah, go collect my pay and that I would be there and whatever. So the next time, there was a gal who flew in from Montauk Island who was supposed to be my quote-unquote therapist. And the room was set up like you set up a stage for theater. There are tape marks on the floor where the desk that she had was just, the wooden desk was to set. There was a square tape mark on the floor where her rolling chair was supposed to remain in. There was a tape mark, rectangular tape mark on the desk that had the cassette tape recorder on it that she would play. And there was a tape mark on the wall that as to where they hung the picture from on the wall. And there were tape marks on the floor where they set my overstuffed chair. So it's just like a set when you go into
like a movie
a
set.
set on stage.
Yeah.
Or a movie. You know. So it was one of those things, and I was going like, why the hell do they have this set? And so I sit down in the chair. I look at the tape and the cassette recorder, and it's a C30. And if you know anything about audio cassette tapes, a C30 has 15 minutes on each side.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So she talked a little bit, tells me to look at the painting. You know, it's a valley with trees and a little stream going through this sharp valley, you know, in the woods. And tells me to look at that and just kind of imagine that. And she starts the tape recorder going. And we're a minute or so into the tape of progression relaxation, and I am just gone. And I come back out of it, and I've got a splitting fucking headache. And I asked her, what time is it? It's an hour later. Okay. Did you flip the cassette? No. I pressed play and played the whole time, and then shut off when you woke up. Well, if I was there for an hour and a C30 cassette, it has 15 minutes on the side.
Yeah.
Excuse me? And you didn't flip it or shut it off? Hello?
Something's not
I'm
lining
not buying
up.
this.
Yeah.
And I've got a fucking headache that just won't quit. I used to get headaches like this when I was driving over the road. And I had fixing computers. And I got hit by a cop's radar gun. So I figured they hit me with radar of some sort while I'm there. Now I go through a number of sessions over the summer of '83. And we get near the end, and I say, okay. And the next session, since I knew it was set up like a stage, I knew it was precisely aligned and everything. The next session, I threw myself into the chair and threw it all on askew. If you know what I mean.
So
and I didn't have a headache.
Yeah. So you tried to engage with it.
And so I did that every single time. I threw it a different way every single time I was there. Because I didn't like the headaches. And one of the last times I was there, I went, okay, I want to know what's fucking going on, and I'm taking control this time. So I did. And I started looking. I went to the Montauk base because everything was synced. The radar at Minneapolis was synced to the radar on Montauk Island, New York. And they were using radar on the person in the chair to provide the final syncing that they needed.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw the kids where they were tortured and what they were going through, and I started exploring underneath the base, and there was psychically.
Now, can we get into that a little bit? Like, what kind of torture was being done to the kids?
They're giving them drugs. They're in garishly painted rooms that were freaky.
Mm-hmm.
And they're playing loud music on them, not allowing them to sleep. They're trying to fracture their brains so that they could implant another personality.
Gotcha.
Okay. And underneath the base was a reptilian. And for my time in space, I had a kill on sight for all reptilians. And what I didn't tell you when I was on the base, in the officer's mess, just before it flipped up on me,
Yeah.
I saw a reptilian there on base.
Now, what did the reptilian look like, if you could describe it?
Apparently, we humans have a little switch in our brain that allows other races to present us with images.
Mm-hmm.
And the only thing I noticed was the face. The face was a little bit different. And, of course, the eyes and stuff. But that was basically it, I noticed. I didn't see a tail on them, although the ones I saw in space had tails. And most of them did. And I had to kill outside orders. So, one top project under the base was a reptilian with a tail, basically running the project. And I said, I'm refueling. How can I take care of this? I can't do anything here. You know, it's a maze underneath this base, like a labyrinth. I know. We'll set up an energy minotaur and have it go through and destroy the base.
Can you talk a little bit about what an energy minotaur is and how that?
You know what a minotaur is? That's a man bull type thing.
Yeah.
And this was made out of energy. So anyone who saw it would see that energy, would see the shape of a man bull or a minotaur going through. Just destroying everything in its sight, in its path.
Now
that was the last. That was my last time on the Montauk project. The time before that.
And that's a very dangerous project. I've known people in the past that were a part of it, and towards the end. And they were saying some of the abilities that project and the people managing it had to kind of ruin your life. They could do that very easily. I think this particular gentleman, he was hit with all kinds of psychic attacks, but then eventually got out of nowhere colorectal cancer. And he said it just came on so quickly that he 100% blamed the project because of some of the exotic technologies they had on base. Did you ever see any like flexing on their part that, you know, don't mess with us or else sort of a thing?
In the 80s, afterwards, I was talking to someone and I was discussing some of the stuff from the Montauk project. And my ex-NSA handler at the time, Dunley Wells, pulled me aside and said, "You better not talk like that. They're going to kill you." And at that time, I had already been in a severe auto accident. The MP that hit me got promoted and transferred. He took 18 inches off the end of the I-beam of our 65 Dodge Dart. He crushed it that far in. So that tells you how fast he was going. And that left me with chronic pain, strokes, and I went into the doctor because of the strokes, and they didn't know what was going on, and they did a myelogram and left me paralyzed from the waist down. I walk with a cane today, but that's not because of any of that.
Hey guys, here's a quick reminder to head on over to heroparanormal.com. Please smash that subscribe button. There's a ton of content over there. For the price of a cup of coffee a month, you can access all the content over there. Also, if you're listening via YouTube, please like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. The shadow ban is real. It seems sometimes we'll have a bunch of people watching something and it'll still show 0 views. And last but not least, you can purchase things like hats, books, and t-shirts at the small eBay store. You can also get Spice Natural Bronze or Bulletproof Wolves soap. Anything you buy helps support the podcast. HeroParanormal.com and HappinessMedical.com. We're back.
I did the gal from Montauk Island missed one session, and I had gotten there early, so I had to wait to get into the building for the guys to come over and unlock it. And 3 men. They drove over, they unlocked it, and I went in, pulled back up to the door, went in, and they said I can collect my pay because she wasn't going to be there that week. And I sat outside, and it drove like I was going back to the VA. And instead, I went around the building and parked in the far corner of the lot in the shade of a tree. And was kind of watching the airplanes take off and land and listening to the sound. And then all of a sudden, there was no air traffic. I looked at my watch, and it was the start of the session. I went, okay. I'll just enjoy the weather. I've got time before my next appointment. I said, easy. I was watching the butterflies and stuff flit around. Then the air traffic started up again, and I looked at my watch, and it was the end of my session. So I knew that they were shutting off the airport for that 1 hour time frame of my session. So I knew that that was the radar that I had been feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Another time I was there, I was really worked up and I hadn't slept well. And my programming partner lived in Twin Cities at the time. And so I had an appointment with him, and I said, I really need 8 hours of sleep before I can go home. But I've only got an hour to do it in. Can you stay here and make sure it's only an hour that I'm asleep? And he said, sure. Now, he had a synchronous clock over the doorway to his room. And about 16 foot away was the other wall of the room, which was the outside wall. And at the head of the bed next to the outside wall, he had a synchronous digital clock, where the numbers go click, click, click as they trip down the room. And then he had an LED digital watch on. And he sat at the foot of the bed. My head hit the pillow. The clock at the end of the bed started going, just zipping around. And he was looking at the clock on the wall, the clock on the bed, and the watch. None of them were adding up, and they're all in sync before we started this thing. And when an hour on the clock on the wall came up, I woke up wide awake, alert, refreshed, whatever. And he said, look, I looked at the clock by the head of the bed. It had gone 8 hours ahead. His digital watch was 2 hours ahead. And the clock on the wall was normal. So I went home. That's what I call sleeping fast. So yeah, there's a lot of paranormal stuff like this. In the 90s, I was back down. We had moved down to the Twin Cities because Jen worked for the phone company, wife, and This was our second time down here. And I was working at, what was I working at the time? I was working as a customer support for King Video, which was a cable company that were eventually purchased by U.S. West. And when they were purchased by U.S. West, I went to work for U.S. West. In U.S. West, I programmed telephone line circuits, and then later I designed high-cap circuits for them. And then when they moved the design job to India, I ended up doing repair and redesign. And then 9/11 happened, and that was the end of my time with Quest. But anyway, they would attack me. And I'd take them off. And, I was trying not to be violent or anything, and attach the mentally.
Hey, Joe, who's they? Who? I'm sorry. Who's attacking you?
I was a target for military, for people who are learning how to remote view.
So this is like a psychic attack.
Kind of like a test subject then.
Yeah. And so I was just attaching their leg to the light so that they'd kind of sizzle at the other end. Funny, but nothing serious. And then I got a pretty hard attack, and I asked, do I have the right to defend myself? And I was told, yes, I do.
Oh, wow.
So I hit the person in the chair. But I thought, before I do this, before I actually do damage, I should say desist or die. So if you ever hear desist or die in your head, stop whatever you're doing and don't do it anymore. Yeah.
So you say the person in the chair, you're talking about people that were in the Montauk chair trying to attack you?
It wasn't a Montauk chair at that time. At that time, they were laying in a bed. They had a lie detector on them, and they had earphones, and they had electrodes to their head. There was someone sitting down next to them that was kind of controlling the situation, similar to what I was doing in Minneapolis. And someone in a room up above or off to the side or whatever that was monitoring all the electronics of everything that they were monitoring to see whether they're getting truthful situations. That was the whole deal about doing the hypnosis and the everything else they were doing with the Monroe tapes. They're trying to get to that truthful situation, because I said any desire you have, any thoughts you have, any beliefs you have, they're going to influence your remote viewing. And so that's what they're doing. And I said, well, why should I attack the poor guy who's totally out of it and just doing what he's told? Let's attack the person who's telling him what to do. So I did that.
How did that?
Psychic attack, correct?
Psychic attack, yeah.
Gotcha. How did that go when you attacked the person that was telling you what to do?
Not telling me, telling the person who was doing the real viewing of me. What to do. And then the person and I said, well, let's go and hit the person who's monitoring them, because they aren't stopping this.
Mm-hmm.
So I hit the person who was monitoring them. And I thought, they still didn't stop it at that. And I thought that would have been enough, right? So I said, screw it. And I started working my way up the chain of command. And in the chain of command was a reptilian who looked like a general. And instead of killing him, because by this time I had Reiki, I was a Reiki master besides,
Mm-hmm.
I did unconditional healing love. You know what happened?
What happened?
I was marked toxic. Imagine that. So yeah. Now that's the Montauk Project stuff out of the way and some of the psychic stuff. Now, if you'd like to find out what I did in space,
Yeah. If you don't mind going there.
I don't mind going there. Okay, in space, when I was going up the first time, I really wanted to get home and get married. And I was out, they'd take me out to a jump point with a ship. And I was in a silver suit. And the silver suit is a compression suit. Our space suits are not compression suits, but this is a compression suit, like a scuba diver suit.
Mm-hmm.
And I say it's silver, but it's like a very fine chainmail and multi-levels in between until you get to what actually touches your skin. And the suit itself monitors everything you do and can provide, nourishment, whatever, for however long you need. And if you need a tourniquet on something, they'll recognize that and form a tourniquet. If you're hit by a projectile weapon, lower velocity, like a bullet or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
it'll wrap the energy around you. It'll deflect some laser and some plasma weapons. Okay? Now you understand the silver suit a little bit more. Inside the silver suit, you got a heads-up display. That's a stereo optic. So, anyway, I'm in the suit. The ship goes through the jump, and I don't. So I'm left hanging in space. I can see the Earth is about a marble. And I'm just floating in there, and I'm going, guys, can you come and get me? And a little bit later, they came back to get me. But they said, just do some programming learning until we get back to you. Now, the program learning, they had a script that was goldish color, and three-dimensional. And depending on how you rotated it, determined what it meant. Now, I don't remember anything more than that with the script. And I haven't been regressed enough to give you any more information. I was only regressed once to verify that I was in space like that.
Mm-hmm.
And that took an hour to get there. So
Did what was the process to get there? Was it did you have to enter any facilities, or how did that go?
you mean space?
Yeah.
Or, well, remember I told you about that low building I was in?
Yeah.
That was the building that was the spaceport.
Got it.
For, I would guess, a saucer-like vehicle, because it was only like 30, 40 foot in diameter. So it wasn't very big.
Fascinating.
And they took me to the rings of Saturn. And, I had put out there that we're building spaceships at the rings of Saturn. We built helped build the shell for a 2,500-foot one. I was running a hydrogen oxygen plasma torch, deposition torch. And we were making it out of debris from the rings. So it would look like an asteroid type of thing. And then we had another ship that was 8,500 foot long. It was substantially bigger that I worked on also out there. My room on the base was basically about 6 foot by 10 foot, and it had a platform for sitting and sleeping, and everything had lights. I had lights coming from the walls, I had lights coming from the ceiling and the floor and the platform. And the lights changed depending on time of day and things they wanted me to do. After that little experience where I jumped without them, or they jumped without me, they blocked my desire to come home for a while. Until after I got home, back to Earth again. Another time on Mars, there had been a battle there, and I was out collecting body parts and dung for analysis, and someone else was collecting weapons. And one of their children shot me in the side with a heavy plasma and took off part of my left side of the suit. Next thing I knew, I was laying on what we would consider an autopsy table, metal with drainage on it. And there was a three-fingered alien holding my head, telling me to watch what was going on. I was out of the suit, but I was wrapped in we used to have space blankets that had a silver side and a gold side. The gold side was to keep the heat in. And I was wrapped in that, but I was open on the left side of my body. And a couple of beer kegs came out, and they had little arms that came out of them. Not like arms that you see on a rope, but little mechanical, very fine mechanical things that could move very fast back and forth.
Wow.
And they were 3D printing the blood vessels and the nerves and the muscles back together on the side. And then they finished with printing the skin back on. So that was another, kind of traumatic experience, if you will.
Wild. And this was way before what we would know
72.
of. Yeah, 3D printing.
Well, I shouldn't say this was 72. Yeah, it's before we had 3D printing. That was my time. But they didn't have time like we have it. And so they were allowed to keep me for 60 years. So, or for the 60-year time span from my birth till 60 years old type of thing. That first vehicle that we made, the 2,500 foot one, we put it in place somewhere in the 1950s, early 1950s. And I think that was part of the contract that they had made with Eisenhower. His meeting with them at Edwards Air Force Base when he went for a dental procedure.
Hey, Joe, a quick question. Do you know, or do you have an opinion on what these types of aliens look like that have the contract with Eisenhower, or even Truman?
I don't know definitely. I know the story of Valerie Thor. Valerie Thor looked like just one of us, but he was 5'6", so he was a little smaller. And the group, the Caucasian aliens that I was stationed with, 6'3" was about average.
Did any of them have pointed ears that you recall?
No, I don't recall any pointed ears. The Caucasian aliens just look like you and me, basically, except their eyes were a little bit bigger. Like their eyes had more functionality to them or something. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
The ship that we're on around Saturn was kept dimly lit, like a dark room, for developing film. And if you needed to go somewhere, there would be color lines on the floor to tell you where to go.
Can you talk about, when you're done with this part of it, how cloning fit into this? That might explain some things. Go ahead and finish what you're saying.
Yeah. I made it one time I kind of stepped off the line a little bit, checked out another room, which was a mess hall for aliens, and I saw we're not allowed to talk about Bigfoot, so I saw a Wookiee. We're not allowed to talk about Bigfoot, so I saw a Wookiee. I saw a number of grays, different types of grays, different shapes of grays, different number of fingers, different number of toes, type of thing. And I saw in there a praying mantis in battle armor. So you can think about, 7 foot tall praying mantis in battle armor, black battle armor. What I saw. So some interesting things, if you know what I mean. And they made about 8 clones of me. And when I came back from space, instead of being 6'3 3/4", I was 6'3" even.
Weird.
So I'm possibly a clone. Also, the weird thing is, before I went into space, I understood a lot of math. I could do things working with limits and multi-dimensional equations, simultaneous equations. I could solve most of that stuff in my head. When I came back, I couldn't do any of it.
So you might be
memories.
You might be a clone. Yeah.
Because for the first year or two afterwards, first little bit with the clones, there were other things. They're given as whatever to this, that, or the other thing. And the reptilians did a lot of torturing. Tailed reptilians. There are reptilians that don't have tails.
Mm-hmm.
There's a reptilian race that developed on this planet. And their organs are a little bit different than ours. I can't wait. I think it's an iguana type thing that they're based off of. And they're very intelligent. And they know how to trick the switch in people's brains. But the thing is, they can trip the switch, and everyone around them will see them as a human, and everything human. But if there's a camera that takes a picture of them, it'll see the alien. So if you take a picture and you see, hey, there's this sci-fi conference or whatever, and I took a picture because that looked like two interesting humans, but they're alien looking. That's probably one of them. So, yeah, where were we? You wanted to get to the cloning.
Interesting. Yeah.
That was different. The cloning. When you go in, when you enlist in the service, the first thing you do is you get your shots, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you take your shirt off, and you step forward, you get a shot in each arm. You step forward, you get a shot in each arm. Most of the guys at that point would go sit down on the floor so they didn't fall up. And then some of us would step forward one more time and get another set of shots. And then if you actually did go into space with aliens, you got more shots. Now, I don't know how this fits in, but most of the men I've talked to that have actually been in space have some form of fibromyalgia.
Interesting.
And the fibromyalgia and the remote viewers, I've talked with a number of remote viewers that were trained by the military, and they seem to be suffering from neurological disorders from the fibromyalgia. Like one that I talked to, he's starts with a V. He loses balance and stuff. And the thing is, vertigo, that's what it is. My wife tells me. Vertigo, she says from the side of the room as I'm talking. And there again, that's affecting the nerves. And there's a bacteria out there that's responsible for like 20 plus autoimmune diseases. And the same bacteria that causes fibromyalgia. The autoimmune diseases are things like lupus and Lyme's disease and Sjogren's disease, just to name a couple of them. And what you get depends on disease. To me, autoimmune diseases are like 2 and 3 part poisons type of deal. But anyway, this bacteria called Borrelia burgdorferi is really hard to kill. Unlike most of our natural bacteria, what this thing thrives on is magnesium. And where's the best source for magnesium in your body? Your nervous system. The autoactin 83 left me with chronic pain and fibromyalgia. And it took me many years to figure out what the bacteria was and how to kill it. And it took 7 times for me to kill. Another friend that was a gal that picked it up in camping trips, because you can get it out camping too. She had 23 times to kill it. And then she had surgery, and she doesn't want to disrupt the tendon that was implanted in their spine. So.
Very interesting.
In my book, you'll see things on mind control. You'll see things in there on how to build your own UFO and a list of patents related to it. Pius has done some of this patent work on it. But Pius was part of the Navy, or was overseeing the Navy, and the patents were assigned to him. And that's why he got patent under his name. And that's typically what they did. T.C. Brown's patents are in there. And it always bothered me that T.C. Brown was working on a flying disc, and he got it to fly at 4,000 kilometers per hour in the equated tube. And, why didn't they do something with that? World War II happened, And then in 43, he left the Navy. You know, and the war was still going on. And I just couldn't fathom why he did that. But you know what else happened in 1943?
What's that?
The Philadelphia experiment.
That's right.
You know, I talked about them holding hands on me at all times.
Mm-hmm.
You read the Philadelphia experiment, and they talk about that in there. Because it's easy to go to other universes and other times, other places.
So they were kind of grounding you, keeping you here, more or less.
Basically, that was it.
Joe, do you think, with now in reflection, that you're in all likelihood some either an alien or a hybrid? Or I'm not trying to be funny either.
I believe that there is no way that my mother should have been able to have a child. So someone did some intervention somehow. Exactly how, I don't know. But there's definitely intervention there. So I may have been alien. Or a hybrid, if you prefer. I look like my father. I got a lot of the same health issues that my mom has, so it does some minor tweaking of the DNA. And I got some of the health issues of my father too. So a lot of the genetic things are still there that are family-oriented genetics. Clone could be. I mean, how do you lose height in space? Don't you grow when you're in space?
Well, how do you lose 50 pounds in 3 days?
Yeah, at least 50 pounds, if not more. I mean, in the mess hall, when I was in basic training, we had half an hour to eat. And Swenson's at the end of the line, so I had to eat fast. And you were allowed 1 glass of water, 1 glass of milk, but as much Coca-Cola as you wanted. And we had these metal trays, and I usually tried to top the metal tray by 3 to 4 inches to get enough to eat, because you're just burning through it for some reason. We were given saltpeter pills, supposedly.
Well, what kind of pills?
Salt pills.
Yep. Okay.
The guys called them saltpeter because you never could get an erection on them. But who knows what they were, if you follow what I'm getting at.
Sure.
I think I was the only guy that was destined to go to space with aliens in that group. I didn't get to hear what the other guys were going to for their work. Most of them in the group, because the whole group flight that I was in was military intelligence, and most of them were decoding, code breaking, and that type of stuff. And I would qualify.
I'm sorry. Based on your experience that you recall now, that you didn't recall when you first came out, just kind of using your knowledge and wisdom and just your belief system, maybe, what do you think, more or less, if you're just going to give us a thumbnail, what do you think's happening in space now? And I mean, if I'll just use the term Galactic Federation, you know, it appears as though Space Force and, you know, and these sort of things. I mean,
there's basically a conflict between the group that I was with, which would have been a model for Star Trek Federation, They called themselves the Confederation of Realms. And they talked about 9 different realms that were in the Confederation. And what I call the Confederation of Blood, both are claiming the planet Earth. And human beings are an experiment to see who should have control of it.
Who should have the what? I'm sorry.
Control of Earth. At the time, I had asked, I went to Mars, I went to a moon on some other planet, and we harvested grubs that were 18 inches long off of stalks that looked like corn stalks, but they were 6 inches in diameter. And we had to split these grubs from snout to ass on the belly because the shell was too hard to kill them. The green goo that leaked out of them melted our suits. So when we had that task, we knew we were going to get a new suit. And whenever we did this, it was twilight-like, but that could be how far it was away from the actual sun, too. And that was one of the things I remember, everything came rushing back. It was November 11th, 2020 at like 2 or 3 a.m. I couldn't sleep, so I was just kind of surfing through, and someone had an image there of a fox bat. And that slammed it all home to me. I'm going, that can't be real. That's got to be AI or fake or somehow. Because there was this big bat hanging upside down under the eaves of a house over a road. And they called it a fox bat, so I went out and looked at it. Sure enough, that's what a fox bat is. They're basically eating fruit and stuff like that. They're not like blood sucking,
but absolutely,
what I found, they did something else.
Absolutely huge, though, about the size of a fox, you say?
The fox bat was 5 to 6 foot tall.
Wow.
And that's what freaked me out, because I thought it was unreal. I mean, bats are no big deal. They're little things. They may get in your hair or something like that. When we were out on Lovis's farm, the bats would come out of the attic of the house. There was a painted Lady Victorian that they had ordered from Sears catalog, so it was painted white. But the bats would come out of the attic at night and clean up all the bugs that were flying around. Mm-hmm. So I had no fear of them, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But,
Well, what was it about this fox bat that you think triggered your release of memories that up until that point?
It was so damn big, and it looked like the thing I saw. They had a round basketball type head, and I'm going like, oh, what the hell is that? I thought that was just a night terror. Can't be real, right?
Now, throughout all this, did you ever have any involvement with, like, CIA assets?
Okay, when I got out of Montauk, CIA and NSA monitored me for the next 10 years. They monitored me from 82 to 92. And from 92 to 2001, August, it was the FBI. I had my exit interview with the FBI in August of 2001. And then 9/11 happened, and I was back on the charts for monitoring. So they're probably monitoring all this, and they've heard all this before, so I'm not worried about it. There's nothing new here that I'm telling them. And after that, an ex-NSA handler asked me to write a book about it, and write it as fiction. Because if I wrote it as fiction, they'd let it slide.
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote it, and he looked at it. The publisher that he had for me backed out. The editor that he had backed out, and he backed out. But that was after he said he knew about space because he had been in space. He was on a TR-3B over Belgium in the 80s because he had designed a serendipity allowed him to design a force field when he was working on a radio transmitter. And when he was in college at North Dakota State University. And so he believed the part about being in space. But he didn't believe the Montauk Project, so he did a check on that. So he contacted the NSA to verify that I was involved in the Montauk Project. I said, I'm getting my disability from the Montauk Project, not from the time and space. And then just kind of left it there. He was really frustrated because I refused to write it as a fictional account because I've been programming for years, and you can't lie to a damn computer or you get the wrong data back. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so the book is written like a computer program. It's not really written like and it took a lot of work for me to get it to that and to try and get a timeline into it. And then Eric talked to someone about it. Now, he believed the Montauk Project, but he didn't believe in space. And this other ex-NSA agent that Eric knew was on stage with Hal, and Hal put off just clean out and said, "Oh yeah, we had a base at L5." That's all he said.
We had he said L5?
Yeah, L5.
Yep.
Range point 5. We had a base at L5. We don't anymore. And so Eric called me up. You won't believe what he just said. You know, all excited. And I said, yeah, I know. We had one there. And then one of the gals that was in MUFON, I'm involved in the CIA. I said, okay. And she said, I'm an agent. And I said, not really, you've got a handler. And she said, well, you shouldn't publish that book because it gives out too many secrets. And I said, no, it doesn't. And you've got a handler. And the next time, I told her, look, because they had gone into my computer and they had scrambled the book, which pissed me off. I said, you won't know this, but your handler will. Tell your handler, desist or die. You know what happened the next day?
What's that?
She came back.
Uh-huh.
Got the whole book back.
Whoa.
You know what else happened?
What's that?
She moved 250 miles away. She thought I was threatening her. I told her it was for a handler, not for her.
Did sister die? Wow.
Did sister die? In other words, stop what you're doing, or I will strike out.
Mm-hmm.
They're running the project in 2003, and it was driving me nuts because they were trying to change timelines again. But instead of trying to take someone out of this timeline and put them into the other timeline, they're just killing off people to try and change the timelines. They had a fascist sitting in the chair that thought this was good to kill off all these people. And so in 2003, I got some people together that I knew had some ability. And I had, before this point in time, I had been going and getting the equipment. The equipment had been moved to New Jersey somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And I had been hitting the equipment, going on a capacitor here, a transistor there, a coil, shorting out a coil there, type of deal, just little things. And so gremlins in the electronics, shall we say. I was a gremlin in the electronics. And then I was driving on 94 going toward the tunnel, and it's about 5 lanes there. And I was in the far right-hand lane, and the traffic was so heavy I couldn't get over to the left lane. And then I saw all these black lines going in front of me as I was going through different timelines. And suddenly I was in the far left-hand lane, and there was no traffic on the road. And I decided that was a trigger. I had to do something. And so at that point, I got the group together. They came over to the house here, and we sat out in the backyard, and we visualized the power circuit following it back from the chair all the way back to the hydroelectric dam that was powering it. And one of the guys went through and rewired all the circuit breakers so that from the chair back to the dam, so that we could push power back through both circuit breakers. And another fellow gave me an extra boost of earth energy. And there was all kinds of discussion. Well, what about hospitals and this, that, and the other thing, because moral issues. And I said, basically, I'll take the heat for it. And we gave it a push from the chair all the way back, and the northeast coast went dark. That was in August of 2003. And you can read about it in the newspapers. They had this mysterious thing. Those circuit breakers weren't supposed to go out like that. They're supposed to be protected from having feedback like that. To my knowledge, that's the last time they used the chair. But we do have a fascist government. So
things are still moving right along. Is in your experience, something that has been sort of, I guess, leaked by the government is the reality that people have just assumed is science fiction, but the reality that the government, the military, is able to manipulate space and time. That's been kind of leaked. Did you ever get any information on that?
The equipment that they used to do this is with the help of reptilians.
Mm-hmm.
Other races don't want to give that technology to us because we weren't ready for it. But this, I told you about the conflict between the two groups. There was a third group that came in.
Yeah.
Negotiated a solution, and the solution was to create the human race. So the human race probably started with Noah. And each group was supposed to be in control for so many years. Usually it's about a 12,500 year cycle of our time that they're in control. And the switch was supposed to come from the reptilians to the, shall we say, the Federation. And I know that when I was in space, I wasn't allowed to be on the moon because that was a reptilian base. I know that during World War II, the reptilians were helping the Nazis. Victor Schauenberger had done one of the first Nazi UFOs with implosion drive, and at 22,000 kilometers in altitude, he was able to fly at 9,000 kilometers per hour using a couple of electric motors. And he did a number of 3-foot diameter units that were radio controlled that they used to pester our bombers as they're coming over, the Foo Fighters. And then they did a 50-meter diameter, half a football field.
Mm-hmm.
One, and that was one that flew at 22,000 kilometers in altitude at 9,000 kilometers per hour. And he had designed a implosion drive submarine, and they may have done that because it was a bigger submarine than anything that they had at that time. They could fit a 30-foot diameter saucer inside of it. The saucers that the Germans ended up, Schauenberger didn't put weapons on his devices. And so the saucers that the Germans ended up making, they did put weapons on, and those were the saucer designs given to them by the reptilians. And that goes back to the Antarctic base down there.
Mm-hmm.
Admiral Byrd and Forrestal did an assault on that base with 2 aircraft carriers, a few destroyers, a couple of subs, had their assets handed to them by the saucers. They only took 1 saucer down, though. You know how they did that?
How's that?
A submarine ran into it while it was underwater.
Love it.
Now that's in the DIA data dump that they did a few years back, and you can find that in Len Cassen's book, Military Encounters for Extraterrestrials. Victor Schauenberger did a book called Living Water, and if you want to find the saucer story, you want to go to the first edition because the NSA has a policy of removing material that the military-industrial complex does not like in books, from books. So the books are really edited down from what they were. If you can find first editions, you'll find more information.
Gotcha.
In later editions. In the 70s, I had a pen pal, Tom Pauls, or you may have heard of him as T-Bill Prolicki. He wrote a book, How to Build Your Own Flying Saucer and Other Endeavors in Theoretical Engineering, and I wrote to him because there were errors in the book.
Uh-huh.
And he said, yeah, he knew about the errors in the book. And his editor, Mossman, had made sure that they were there so that the book could be published. Okay?
Interesting.
You want to find something more interesting?
Yeah.
Mossman died 9 years before he sent the book in to be edited.
What?
Yeah.
He died he died 9 years before he sent the book in to be edited.
Yeah. Before it was even postulating the book before it was written.
Unbelievable.
And Thibaut Pilecki had his own encounter with the UFO. And they were showing him the drive system on it. He had been a bike racer in the Olympics when he was younger. So,
and let me ask you a question, and Eric may have asked you this before, Joe. He alluded to the fact that he had heard, things with like Corey Good and others with this 20 and back narrative, and how difficult it is to kind of not get stuck in the weeds there. How do you think those guys came across that information? Do you think it's valid information, or did they? How did that all go down? Do you think there's some truth there and they just elaborated on it? Or do you think they heard somebody else talking about it? What's your opinion of Corey Good, I guess, basically?
There may be some truth. There may be... I think Corey Good was pressured into making the statement that he did.
Yeah.
Legally.
Yeah, I do too.
Because legally they could, they have the tools and the capabilities to destroy you financially, among other things. And if Trump gets his way, they have the tools to just deport you to a foreign prison. Anyone off the street that he doesn't like, type of deal.
Yeah, you want to avoid that adversity.
Yeah, but I usually don't try to think about those things too much.
Gotcha.
I just know that they're there, and there's so much other stuff. Like I was at a conference. I think it was the same one, the previous one to the one I met Eric at. And the guy was talking about having been on the project of building the first alien reproduction vehicle. And I'd seen the plans for that. And I said, the problem with that is the system you have for power there is going to generate a lot of neutron radiation. So it's going to kill the pilots. And he said, well, that's the problem we have. They're only allowed 2.5 flights. Otherwise, they'll die from the neutron radiation. And I said, yeah, that's because of the way they're generated. When the aliens do the neutron radiation stuff, I talked to a friend of mine who was a chemist, or is a chemist. He teaches high school chemistry now, but he has taught college chemistry. And what he's working on is, I think it was his master's degree. Before that, I told him about something called resonant chemistry, and using frequency as a catalyst in chemical reactions, which is something we did at space all the time. And I said, design your own deal to test this out. And what he ended up designing was he had a glass tube, like a neon bulb tube.
Mm-hmm.
And it had only hydrogen in it. Okay? And so he ran a frequency from a high voltage transformer to charge it, AC. And then he ran a counter frequency to get that as a magnetic frequency. And he used a optical spectrum recognition system. And that was connected up to an Apple II computer. And he had spent 5 years before he demonstrated to Minnesota MUFON. And during that 5-year time, he had his high school students recreate the project to make sure that anyone could do it. Being able to reproduce it, in fact, is what makes it work, right? And by doing that, he changed all of the hydrogen in the tube to helium. And we hadn't really thought about it a whole lot when we presented at MUFON. One of the guys in the audience said, that's a fusion reaction. What type of radiation are you giving out? and went, oh shit, what type of radiation are we giving up? So we checked, and the only radiation that was coming out of it was neutron radiation. Now, remember I told you about the plasma fusion batteries?
Mm-hmm.
This is basically how they work, but they're using something else besides hydrogen. And by changing the frequency in it, they could change it to helium. They can change it to anything they want to. But this is a method of tapping zero-point energy, which causes this to work. And you have, if you want to pull the energy out from the neutron radiation, you need a layer of either aluminum or barium as the first shield. Then you use a layer of magnesium alternating with layers of bismuth as subsequent shields. And this will produce a stack, a capacitive stack. The magnesium will convert the neutron radiation to ultraviolet, and the to, oh God, what was it? Is it ultraviolet or is it something? The bismuth converts it to ultraviolet, but the neutron radiation converts it down to X-rays. That's what it is. And then you have this layer stack, and there's like 50 to 60 layers in there, alternating layers. And that will produce a voltage pile from the capacitor network. So you can pull off high voltage directly off of it. And by controlling the amount of energy you're putting into the conversion, you control the amount of energy you put out. And that's a plasma fusion battery. Now, if you talk to someone and you say, like, what's her name? Linda Moulton Hall.
Yeah.
You have a piece of material that has 57 layers, alternating layers of magnesium bismuth? Wow! What would they use that for? Now you know. Now you know exactly what they use that for.
Interesting. Now, you have mentioned Hal Puthoff a few times. And interestingly, you know, when it comes to that name, Confederation of Blood, what comes to mind for me is the Church of Scientology that talks about some interesting, I guess we would call them alien beliefs. You know, things along the lines of implants and extraterrestrial civilizations and alien interventions and earthly events. And Hal Puthoff does have some history with the Church of Scientology. When you were told about some of this, I guess, alien intervention collectively, did anything along the lines of Scientology ever come up?
No, I haven't studied anything on Scientology. All I know is that they have a device where you're supposed to try to clear yourself. You know, it's an electronic device, and you got a meter, and you're trying to clear all the junk out of your way. And one of the best remote viewers we had under Hal Puthoff, Russell Targ, had been a Scientologist.
Yeah.
So the name is slipping my mind right now.
You know,
But you know,
I always get blown. Go ahead.
Pat Price, and that was actually, I don't know if you heard this. Nobody shared this with me. I don't even know if I'm supposed to say this because I don't think it's a big deal. that Pat Price had. They were worried. The CIA was worried that Pat Price had shared some of their.
Pat Price is not right. Indigo Swan.
Oh,
Okay, so go ahead.
yeah, Ingo.
That's who it was. Yeah, Indigo Swan. He was the one, and he was killed because they were worried that he was leaking everything back to the people at the Cheshire House.
Mm.
Yeah, it was that group of remote viewers that was used during the Carter administration to find the hostages that were held by terrorists.
That's right, that were kidnapped. I have a lot of respect for Ingo Swan. I actually named my dog is currently named Ingo, but
Okay. Okay.
Interestingly, before I let the Scientology advanced technology doctrines go and not go there again, I'm always shocked that L. Ron Hubbard described that some of the aliens were walking around in clothes that looked very much like our clothes, using cars, trains, boats. And he claimed that they had spacecraft that were able to mimic or looked exactly like DC-8s without the fans, meaning the jet engines or the turbo fans.
Okay. Yeah. What according to Lacerta,
Uh-huh.
Lacerta, you can look up her files. I was just handed a copy of them by our chief field investigator for Minnesota MUFON. And they were put out back in the 90s, like 96 sometime. According to her, human beings have a switch in our brain. And that switch can make us think that everything we're seeing is normal.
Mm-hmm.
And that way they can be among us and we don't recognize them. And if they turn the switch the other way, which they can do mentally, then we see them as they are. And so there's different things that can flip that switch. And one of the things that they're talking about is cameras and videotaping and that type of stuff. They're not supposed to go anywhere where there's some sort of camera where they can film you in any method, because you don't know who's going to see you in the film and whether because you can't control that switch in them, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And so that's what you're looking at there. And so you go to conferences and they have pictures of these aliens at these UFO conferences, and you're going, I don't remember seeing them there, but I remember seeing people there. I remember that shop. And you're actually seeing the aliens. So, I mean, they've been around for a long time. The reptilian group that I was telling you, that's native to Earth, they're just studying us from a sociological standpoint. They aren't doing a whole lot. I called them Lyrians. And on a Dr. Who show, they're shown to us as Silurians. So, it just may have been my dyslexia getting in there. And I saw the Doctor Who show, and I went, oh my fucking God. Did they actually see these? That's what they look like. What
Interesting. Yeah. Now, I that's interesting. So there's a lot to unpack here.
I hope you enjoyed the topic here.
Oh my gosh, there's so much beneath the surface.
Oh yeah, I mean, what we consider reality is all an illusion. you know. And the reptilians that are from Earth, the native reptilians, call it the illusion that you don't see through.
It sounds a lot like that movie They
a mirror
Live.
universe.
Yeah, it's a lot like the movie They Live, right? Where things can be adjusted.
Yeah, and you know, our brains are wired for magical thinking, so it's really hard to break us out of that.
Yeah, and alluding back to what Eric was mentioning, I'd heard that about Pat Price as well, that he may have been silenced for something similar to what you were mentioning about Ingo. So there is some danger involved with uncovering all of these secrets.
Yeah, well, you know, as a remote viewer, you can go. I mean, for years I liked listening to. If I wanted to know what was going on, I'd go and I'd check on. Oh God, what was his name? He was an old Jewish man who was part of the Bilderbergers, and he advised Reagan and Bush and a whole bunch of people.
Oh, starts with a K.
Huh?
Yeah. Kissinger, that's right.
Kissinger, that's it. And I found it interesting. If I wanted to know something, I'd just go check with him.
That's right.
So, I mean, like with Tom Pauls, he lives in British Columbia. And I check on him from time to time, check out what his health was and how he was doing.
Man.
He died a few years ago, and I knew when he died, and it took him another 3 months for his executor to contact me to let me know that he died. You know, but I knew ahead of time that he died.
Wow.
And I just, the only tabs I keep is say if they're okay. Paul Wellstone was a friend of mine, and I told him he was to run for Senate once. And once he was senator, the next thing he was supposed to do was to run for president. And I felt like I was really let down because they talked him into running for senator a second time. And his plane went down to Minnesota, and the veterans in the field who watched it happen said they saw tracer bolts going from Earth to the plane.
Wouldn't be the first time.
So, yeah.
So there's
he knew me as the guy who could fix his back by rubbing his hand.
That's so cool.
That's called reflexology. So
there's some very real dangers in getting to uncovering some of these things, and sharing some of this information. As we start to wrap up, Joe and Eric, is there anything else you think we're missing that we should maybe kind of mention as we get closer to wrapping things up?
Frequency healing.
Okay.
Frequency healing was made illegal in the United States in 1954 because Royal Raymond Rife had a method of curing cancer. He cured 96% of the cases that came to him within 2 weeks. And the AMA at the time was working with surgery, radiation, and chemotherapy. And they were sitting around 30%. Now, I won't call it a cure. I'll just call it a stop.
Mm-hmm.
And frequency healing can take care of that. You remember I talked about fibromyalgia and Borrelia burgdorferi being involved in 20-plus autoimmune diseases? The Borrelia burgdorferi takes multiple times to cure because it forms something that the Lister Institute originally called an L-form bacteria. And then 60 years after that, the medical associations called it a nanobacteria, and then they said nanobacteria aren't real. And what it does is, if it's hit with an antibiotic, it releases the outer covering of the bacteria, and the nucleus itself balls up into a real tiny knot. And that knot can then infect the mitochondria DNA of gene 6 and gene 7 of your cells. And depending on what else you got going on, like for me, I had Sjogren's disease. Well, Sjogren's disease is a combination of osteoarthritis, which I had, and Borrelia burgdorferi, fibromyalgia, and Epstein-Barr virus. The three of them together, I said there are 2 and 3 part poisons.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the 3 poisons that make up Sjogren's disease. Sjogren's disease is a disease that attacks a gland in your body that produces a fluid. Lupus is its cousin, and lupus attacks any organ in your body. Okay?
Interesting.
Lyme disease is just kind of an extreme case of fibromyalgia, as far as I know yet at this point.
Wow. And I've heard that there's a lot of types of Lyme and Lyme disease might have some, let's just say, dirtier, darker histories than, what we're told.
Well, the Borrelia burgdorferi, one gal got Lyme disease. She got a real aggressive type of it. And she likes to do camping and reenactments. Like reenacting the canoeing, the early times when people lived in tents and went canoeing to get goods and stuff like that. And she got a really aggressive case. I gave her 2 treatments for Borrelia burgdorferi so far. 3 treatments. And one for Epstein-Barr. And she's going like a bat out of hell. Like nothing's going to stop her. Now, the kill frequencies for Borrelia burgdorferi and a whole bunch of human parasites were found by a chiropractor named Hulda Clark. Oh, by the way, the AMA lobbied Congress to make a law against frequency healing in the U.S. That's why it's illegal. Darius Dinshaw wrote a book called Let There Be Light, and in that book, he had different colors of light and different audio frequencies that they reduced down to using Tesla's formula 369. And he has like over 1,000 different ailments and kills. What helps heal your body. And the frequencies he's using are not kill frequencies; they're support frequencies of different systems. And in the back of the book, he tells what system you're treating with what frequency in what area. Very detailed. They had 3 hospitals before 54, and that they were doing these treatments in, and they were having very good cure rates with all kinds of things. And that is kept by the book. They put out over 9,000 volumes of case studies from medical hospitals. So I like that one because of that. Now, the other person that brings us back to the kill frequency, brings us into the kill frequencies, is Hulda Clark. Paul McClark wrote a book called The Cure for All Diseases. She was a forensic chiropractor, which I'd never heard of before, out in the California area. And she was analyzing bodies and to what caused them to die and what parasites they had. I don't know what the parasites affected, all this and that. And so she's got a list of kill frequencies for parasites in there. And these frequencies are typically between 325 and 425 kHz. Back in the late 70s, I was investigating power from the air, and I was living up in Moorhead at the time, and I set up an antenna east to west, and it was about 6 to 8 foot from the our lot line. And because my neighbor knew that I was going to do experiments like that, and solar energy and all kinds of other things, he cut off all his trees at our lot line before this happened. And so it was the end of March, close to the end of March, I think it was, and middle of March or something like that. And I set up this experiment. I was working off of patents from the 1800s through the 20s, trying to figure out what the frequency was that they were using. Now, I had known from reading Tesla's research notes from Colorado Springs that the Earth has a natural resonant frequency for the crystal Earth of about 7.5 cycles per second. And what I had read but had forgotten was Siemens, or Siemens Electronics, had gone to the Great Pyramid and measured the atmospheric frequency at about 50 kHz. Okay, so I did my little setup. I stayed up for about 3-4 days in a row before I had to take a nap. And I was trying to see whether it was related to weather or what was going on with it. And I was seeing a center frequency of 375 kHz. And I was trying to figure out what Morey was doing. T. Henry Morey, in this book, The Sea of Energy.
Mm-hmm.
T. Henry Morey, in his book, The Sea of Energy.
Okay.
A Mormon. Anyway, so I'm going through this, and you know, he tells how to make the circuits there and stuff like that, but he's leaving out a lot of stuff. I have to go through and research other patents and patent applications, what have you. And there was a patent library here in the Twin Cities that I was allowed to do that in. And I'd come down and I'd photocopy a bunch of stuff and take it back and redo it. Anyway, so I set up two 2-liter Pepsi jars. I make into Leyden jars filled with water. I make a coil and I make a pi circuit. I've got things arranged so I've got an over voltage protection for lightning arrestor type of thing going on. I've got a good ground, all this stuff going on. And I'm measuring this for a month. I notice that the frequency will sweep very slowly from 325 to 425 and I'm thinking, well, that's kind of an odd behavior, isn't it? But, you know, okay, that's what it's doing. And center frequency is 375 kHz. But if you take 7.5, multiply by 50,000, you get 375 kHz. I felt better at 375 kHz, but I've got this thing running, right? And all of a sudden, it stops dead. I've got an oscilloscope on it, I've got a VOM on it, and I've got a frequency counter on, and everything just goes dead. And I verify all the equipment's still working. I verify that everything's solid, there's no breaks anywhere. I trace it out to where the lightning arrestor is, and that's still good. And I'm really puzzled as to why it is. And I go out and look at the antenna. These tree limbs that our neighbor had cut off had grown out to 6 to 8 foot to where I had this and shorted out the wire.
Unbelievable.
think of that kind of growth. Okay, now you get that in mind. So I tell my dad, he tells his sponsor. His sponsor knows the soil microbiologist in Detroit Lakes. The soil microbiologist in Detroit Lakes comes in and says, oh, wow, that's amazing. Well, so I go out to his little place, his home in Detroit Lakes, and he's got a 33 by 66 garden plot. And that's from reading Victor Schallenberger's original book, Living Water. And he went down and he found the nodal points, the ley line nodal points. And so he's got a nodal point at each corner of this field. And he's got one on the outside edge of the field that's at 33 foot, 66 foot. The other nodal point, where he'd like to put it, there was a steel fence from his neighbor, post for a steel fence from his neighbor. And he's got little seedlings up. This is the end of May, okay? And his name was Jim. So I go out there and talk to him, and Jim says, well, you found 375 kHz. He said, I took one of these nodules out, and I analyzed it, and it looks like a little egg is what it looks like. And it's formed by microbacteria in the soil. And he said, I analyzed the egg, and you know what I got for the frequency of it? You know what? 375 kHz. We're on to something. These sit about 6 inches below the surface of the soil, these eggs. Okay. Well, what do we do next? He says, is there any way you can I balance my soil to 375 kHz chemically? I think that's great. He says, is there any way we can intensify the field over the soil? I'm thinking to myself, I don't know, acupuncture? Okay. By this time, I had done a write-up on the 375 kHz I had done a write-up. And Tom Pauls had got me into PACE magazine, Planetary Association for Clean Energy. And so I did, which is sponsored by the unit. And so I wrote it up in there, and that this is what I found for the frequencies, because it was just my findings at that time. And I got a couple letters from Russia saying, you've got to come over here and lecture at Leningrad University. No, I'm not going to do anything like that. You got to come over to Kazakhstan and fix our power grid system. No, I'm not going to do anything like that. I'm not leaving the States. Really, the most I could do is go to Canada at that time. And then I get from them a little magazine on psychotronic discoveries in Russia. And I'm going, okay. You know what the magazine is written in?
What's that?
English. English. So someone really wanted me to see this magazine. It plays in later on in my story. So anyway, we go out to Jim's. He said, well, what can we use for acupuncture? And I said, I don't know. You got anything copper? He says, well, I got some 10-foot sections of 3/4 inch copper pipe sitting in the yard. I was going to replumb the house this summer, but I can use some of that. And I can put it off for a while. I said, okay. So the 5 points that we could get at, because remember the 6 point had a steel post in it, we did the 5 points. And I go home and forget about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because this is the end of May. And July 1st, I get a phone call. Joe, you ruined my cash crop. It's Jim on the phone. But that's how he starts out. You ruined my cash crop. And I'm going, I'm sorry. I don't know what I did to ruin your cash crop, but I'm sorry. And he said, you got to come out and help me harvest. August, September, no problem. I said, Jim, your corn is only knee high at the most, because it's the 1st of July. You know, the saying is knee high by the 4th of July, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he's going, no, you don't understand, Joe. You got to come out and help me harvest. We do a who's on first, what's on second type of thing. And he finally convinces me to come out and help him harvest. Well, his cash crop was Indian corn. You know, it goes to about 8 inches long. And it's about 1 inch in diameter type stuff, you know. His Indian corn was 18 inches long and 3 inches in diameter at the base. He had companion planted 6-inch carrots, because a 6-inch carrot, you clip the top, you clip the bottom, and it fits right in the candy jar. The mason jar. And the carrots were the same damn size as the corn. I'm going, those are big fucking carrots. What do you plant? I say, no, and he shows me the seed pack. And I'm going, okay, whatever. He said, I have more tomatoes, peppers, radishes, beets, peas than I can shake a stick at. And I've got the birds just, he was raising chickens, you know, to get the bugs out of the crop. And I got more chicken, more stuff going on than I know what's going on. And he said, look at my cabbage. This head of cabbage was the size of a basketball. And this is my iceberg lettuce. And look, you know how big iceberg lettuce heads are, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was the same damn size as the cabbage. So I'm thinking there must be something going on here. Well, he thinks it's the soil balancing that did it. And I think it's the frequency that did it, right? He sells his property, goes down to Texas, and sets up a truck farm down in Texas. Balances the soil to everything. Nothing happens. He goes bankrupt.
Unbelievable.
By this time, I moved back to the Twin Cities, and someone was wanting me to make something that will stop people from attacking them and stop other things. And we found out the frequency has an impact on ghosts and poltergeists. It drives them out of the area. So I set up he wanted to use this special chip that he found that would give us a 375 kHz frequency, and then we had another oscillator chip that turned it on and off at 7.5 cycles per second. And so we did little power towers. I've got some in my house and stuff that just kind of keep the energy at a nice even keel. And we did this for plants that I had a small garden in the duplex I owned in Brooklyn Park. And the neighbor kids wanted to grow some confectionery sunflower seeds for seeds. And these things are meant to be only 6 foot tall and, 6-inch head, so I didn't think there was a big thing about it. And so we planted those, and my wife likes little grape tomatoes, and so we planted 2 grape tomato plants and 1 beefsteak tomato. And we planted a few radishes. She likes little radishes for salads. And that was it. And I was running a frequency in there of 375 kHz, up and off at 7.5.
So in reality, it seems to me that frequencies and, as Tesla said, 369 and frequencies really do hold the secrets of the universe.
Yeah, they do. And by killing the bacteria, the parasites, like I told you, Hulda Clark had a list. Until I saw that list from Hulda Clark, I didn't know what was actually happening. But that told me what was actually happening.
That's
So
fascinating.
plants,
So I'm assuming the
animals,
same is true with people as plants.
yes, I am. Now, where do those frequencies come from? The Earth is generating those frequencies, but they're not as intense as they once were.
Really?
Yeah, and I think they were, because we had to intensify them to get them up to that level. Now, if you had three pyramids, or pyramidal structures, over nodal points in relation to each other, you could generate this frequency in the sweep. Now, when I was looking at the frequency and trying to do a Fourier analysis on it originally, I knew that there were two frequencies in there. One was the 7.5 hertz plus or minus, whatever. Another one was 50 kHz plus or minus, whatever. But there was another frequency in there I couldn't get. I found out recently there's a frequency of 23 seconds. Once every 23 seconds it pulses. That's the step frequency. As it changes and shifts through these frequencies. You want to know what the kill frequency is for COVID-19?
What is it?
365.555 kHz.
Man. And you said
When I got COVID-19 in 2019, I got directly 2 hops from Wuhan, China. The grandparents went to Wuhan, China, this little gal, and she stayed with them, and they went into the hospital. She came to the birthday party I was at in just outside of Winnipeg, and I got COVID-19 from her.
Interesting. So there's something to all this. There's
365
every 23 seconds, you said.
No, 365 kHz, not the symptoms down. Now it's more than every 23 seconds. I had to do it for 50 minutes to knock it down. So if you've got COVID-19, 55 minutes will knock it down. You got long COVID, 55 minutes would lock it down. I did actually about 45 is where it kicks in. I had a fellow with long COVID, and I said, "Well, try it,"
And you said so
tried it.
The 23 seconds, the frequency you found every 23, was it 23 seconds? Is that correct? Subsequently?
Yeah, it's a pulse that happens every 23 seconds. And I don't know where that's coming from. But that would be like a step frequency, and you may have to go through 2 or 3 pulses.
Well, this is super eerily reminiscent of, I believe it's called the Principia Discordia, claiming that all things happen in fives or divisible by fives. But this goes against like the 23 Enigma, which they talk about in the Illuminatus trilogy, in the Final Secret of the Illuminati, the Law of Fives, or they call it the 23 Enigma. But this is really strange. It seems like there is these correlations, these unexpected correlations, that when you do these experiments, it's almost as if there's an underlying program, right? Like a computer program.
Yeah. Anyway, back to Brooklyn Park and my little garden.
Uh-huh.
Our sunflower seeds that were supposed to be 6 foot tall and 6-inch heads were 12 to 14 foot tall, and they had 12 to 14 inch heads. The little radishes that we had planted,
Mm-hmm.
we harvested as the size of beets. And according to the people who like radishes, they said they were the tastiest radishes they had ever eaten.
Interesting.
The little grape tomatoes were the size of beefsteak, and the beefsteak tomatoes were much larger. We'd fill up a box that you buy paper in, for your computers and stuff. One of those boxes that had several leaves of it in there. And we fill that up every weekend with a harvest.
Whoa.
And we did that for several weeks running. That's 3 frickin' plants.
Now, is this why what you said that it used to be more powerful, these frequencies? Is that why in some, and I could be...
If the casing came off the pyramids,
Uh-huh.
and there was a gold top to the pyramid, gold pyramidal, those things would be generating frequencies like no one's business. And truly, Egypt would have been a land of milk and honey.
So this is maybe why, like in the past, you even go back 100 years or so, and like a lot of these fairs had huge radishes, huge pumpkins, huge apples, and this was long before GMO.
Yeah.
Interesting. This is fascinating, Joe. Wow.
So frequency healing, frequency is a catalyst in chemical reactions. That's really the key. Now today, because of Hulda Clark spending time in jail, and then because she was a chiropractor, chiropractors are allowed to use frequency healing. Medical doctors are not. My medical doctor, before he retired, was in Brooklyn Park, and he said, Joe, I gotta know, I'm gonna retire here in another couple weeks. You gotta tell me what you've been doing. I said, what? He said, you've been doing something that you're not telling me, because I diagnosed you with something that should knock you down and have you out.
Mm-hmm.
And a month later, when I'm going to check on you, there's no signs of it. What the hell are you doing? So I told him. He said, one of the guys I went to med school with, he had a booming practice, and he got cancer. And they told him there was no way to fix it. And there was nothing that they could do. And so he sold his practice. He said, I'm going to die in 6 months. I might as well see the rest of the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so he's over in Germany. And he's having pain from this, severe pain from this. And he goes to the ER to get some medication for the pain. The ER doctor comes in and says, oh, is that all you have? We'll have you cured and out of here in 2 weeks. He's going, but I'm told there's no cure for this. I'm going to die. So 2 weeks later, he's cured. He spent $70,000 for one of these breath machines.
Now you can buy these, correct? Still to this day.
Not really in the U.S. You can get them if you know what you're looking for, but they're not calling them that. Anyway, so he gets back to the U.S. He sets up a new practice in Las Vegas, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's got a 98% cure rate of all AIDS cases and
Wow.
a 96% cure rate of all cancer cases. The ATF comes in with machine guns blasting, shoots up the whole place and confiscates everything, traumatizes his staff, and sends him to prison. 5 years later, he gets a new attorney, and the new attorney says, where's the evidence against my client? Lo and behold, the evidence can't be found anywhere.
Yeah, we see this thing happen over and over again. Yeah.
You know where these things were made? This one was made.
Uh-huh.
It was made just here in the Twin Cities off 694 at a little place called Medtronic, but they can't sell them in the U.S.
I've heard of Medtronic. Yes.
They sell overseas.
Fascinating.
Now, what I do, okay, you can see the complete frequency list at, or a fairly complete frequency list at electroherbalism.com. You can see the Darius tones and try the Darius tones and the Crane Rife tones from chakraforce.com, chakraforce.com, and Spooky 2 out of China is where you can get a Rife machine that's fairly reasonable price before the Trump tariffs.
Oh, by the way, I see ads for Spooky 2 all the time on Facebook, by the way.
Okay, yeah.
Interesting.
And Spooky 2 is an interesting thing. There was a rich investor over in Tasmania that my son-in-law in British Columbia connected me with. And he has one of the original Rife machines that he was using, and there was something called an X Prize at that time where they were looking for an X Prize where we could build a tricorder like Star Trek, heal people, and I suggested we use the cell phone for doing this, and I gave him the frequency list and all that information, and he took it to one of the factories he's part owner of over in China, and they started manufacturing it, and that's your Spooky 2. Now he lives in Tasmania, he has big farms, huge farms in Australia. He raises teak and eucalyptus. He does a companion planting of them. In dry areas, they have 10 by 10 compost piles that they pull the moisture out and use to drip feed the trees. He injects the eucalyptus tree with a bacteria, and taps it like you tap for maple sugar. But instead of maple sugar, he gets about a liter of fuel oil out of each tree per week. And they had thrown a kangaroo into one of the pits and had to take it out. They had to clean out the pit. And the bones in the pit kept growing. So instead of being a normal-sized kangaroo, 6 foot tall type of thing, the thing was 10 foot tall when they took it out. And the Australian government archaeologists thought that they had found a new breed of kangaroo. But as I said, the bones kept growing for years in the midden pit after they killed the kangaroo.
That is insane. This is unbelievable.
Yeah, he asked how he could get his seedlings from Australia to China. And he didn't know what would work. So I told him, give him a frequency of 375 kHz and pulse it on and off at 7.5 cycles per second. And that worked for him. So he could start growing them over China.
Unbelievable. This is where, when you realize how a lot of these technologies and the realities of our world can benefit the human body, that's when it starts, all coming together. And you've uncovered a bunch of wild things, Joe. if the information of frequency and healing and the universe, if we have this underlying pattern or system that can pretty much fix anything. I mean, we hear this in secret space program meetings. We hear, about med beds. We hear about all of these interesting technologies that they use out in the field for special projects, but the average Joe, no pun intended, usually doesn't know about it. You do. Where in our reality can people kind of, because the average listener is probably thinking like, how do I get some of this stuff? How can I help myself? Is this stuff you outline in your book, or is this something that they can find? You gave a number of websites. Could you repeat those one more time?
Okay, electroherbalism.com is one that has a lot of frequencies. The Spooky 2 website has the most frequencies of any website I've seen. Shockerforce.com has some of them. I haven't redone the website since 2004. Hulda Clark's book, The Cure for All Diseases, and its companion book, The Cure for All Cancers, basically have the same tables in it.
Mm-hmm.
In my book, I was a military lab rat. I have an old frequency list, one of the first ones, and that covers a lot of frequencies. See, after 54, they were experimenting to try and get some of these stuff, and that covers
and your book,
a lot of frequencies.
You mentioned it was called "I Was a Military Lab Rat." Where can listeners find that? And I think you mentioned maybe even send donations for MUFON.
They can get a copy of it from me.
Okay.
Or from Minnesota MUFON. Jan Swenson is the treasurer of Minnesota MUFON.
And it's called "I Was a Military Lab Rat."
Yeah.
Great title.
Yeah, and if they just contact me via email, I'll send a copy to them. But the copy does not have all the supporting information, whereas the thumb drive does. And at 2.5 gigabytes, not 2.5, 26.5 gigabytes, excuse me, it takes about an hour and a half to copy one, to create one thumb drive.
Wow.
And that's a 32K gigabyte thumb drive.
And how do they go about sending the donations to you?
They'd have to address it, Minnesota MUFON, care of Jan Swenson. And it's 5601 Judy Lane, Brooklyn Center, Minnesota, 55430, USA.
Wow. Okay. And so there you have.
I will try and figure out a way to send the thumb drive to them.
Sure. And I just received something from another MUFON. MUFON is really good about this stuff. I just received something from another MUFON in the mail. And, MUFON is one of those organizations that I've just been blown away with how connected, how honest, how everything. I just got my entire presentation from Phoenix MUFON, from Stacy Wright there in Gilbert, Arizona, and the Phoenix area. And same thing. She shot me a thumb drive and a DVD. So there's nothing wrong with the good old United States Postal Service. It just works.
Yeah. As long as they don't mess with it anymore.
That's right. And okay. And
now on that thumb drive that I have,
mm-hmm.
It has, I was a military lab rat. It has frequency healing for chiropractors, and it has my CAM book. CAM is Complementary Alternative Medicine. After the auto accident in '83, I facilitated a chronic pain support group up in Fargo Moorhead for 6 years. And we looked at anything and everything that could possibly help us with the pain that we were in. And in that, I collected remedies that were Native Indian, raw juice therapies, Bach flower therapies, homeopathic, chiropractic, acupuncture, Reiki, reflexology, a bit more.
That's great. That is great.
It has about 2,000 different ailments. And complementary alternative medicine is something you can do in addition to traditional medicine, Western medicine. And there's herbs and there's vitamins and there's minerals. I don't have the enzyme therapies that I'm doing in there because, proteins and enzymes, because those are different. And I don't have a full handle on it. I don't have a full homeopathic in there because, again, that's different. And I don't have Ayurvedic in there because, again, a different thing. And I haven't taken the time to fully study it and break it down.
And you mentioned, I think you mentioned you also have an email where people can contact you at. Could you repeat that one more time as well, Joe?
My email is JEMSWENSON@MSN.com.
There you go, listeners. That's where you can contact Joe. And I can't thank you enough for coming on the podcast. You as well, Eric. Thank you so much. You not only for kind of helping me when I've needed things, but you obviously have connected Joe and I appreciate you for that.
Yeah, I'm glad. It's time for all this to come out. I think Joe agrees.
It really is. Thanks so much, guys. And we'll have to do this again. Talk about maybe some other things as well, if that's okay with you, Joe.
Yeah, that's okay.
All right. Thank you so much, and have a very blessed day. Appreciate you both.
All right. Take care, Ryan.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Eric.
Bye-bye.
Man, oh man, that's a lot of stuff to unpack. There's a lot going on. We may have to have Joe on another 1 or 2 times at least. There's so much to unpack. There you have it. I was a military lab rat. Definitely sounds like a read everybody needs to have on their shelves. And something else you need to have on your shelf is a hat from HeroParanormal.com, a hat from SpaceWolfResearch.com. We've got t-shirts, books, also the products like Spice Natural Bronze and Bulletproof Wolves soap. Anything you purchase at HeroParanormal.com and the small shop there, or happinessmedical.com. Anything you purchase there will help support the podcast. And do me a favor, do me a solid. I know this was a long one, a lot of information. It was dense, but had to get it out. If you want to help me out with the algorithm, I can tell you that the shadow ban is real. If you're listening to this via YouTube, Spotify, Rumble, whatever it is, definitely like, share, and subscribe. And don't forget that for the price of a cup of coffee a month, you can head on over to HeroParanormal.com, smash the green subscribe button. I've got 5 on it, and you get it all. Thanks so much for listening. Have a very blessed day. Keep your eyes to the skies, feet on the ground, but don't forget to take a look around.
Esoteric Research Organization.
Hero Paranormal always setting up the pace, man. Crop circle tipping, Illuminati still tripping. Making those ears perk up, gonna make you question your earth.
You better.
Mystery bloodlines and secret society. Creepy shapeshifter says, come sit beside me.
Yeah, cozy on up.
So what's with all this spiral?
Acting like UFOs.
Say what? So Bigfoot and Space Wolf tiptoe through the dark. Third eye blinding, tune in and blast off, blast off.
Blast off, baby.
Blast off.